hockey fans, are you ready to brave the wild? With me, your host, Paladino Joey, or Joey Awajan. Brave the Wild is on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Double Twist. Thank you once again for joining me today for our annual State of the Wild 2019 edition. That's right, this is the big one, the granddaddy of them all. We're going to do the season wrap-up. It's going to be a two-segment show, two pretty big segments, I got to think. Second segment will probably be even bigger. But the first segment, season wrap-up, we'll put a bow, a big green, red, and gold bow on the Minnesota Wild season. Or is it weed color? I guess we'll throw in the weed color, too, in that bow. Lots of colors. Lots of Minnesota, which I can see in the background right now. I can see green. I see a little bit of red, and then freaking gray sky. Yuck. At least at this day, on this particular day when I'm recording segment number 1. But, yep, the awards, demerits. Biggest disappointment, biggest surprise. MVP, of course, leading things off with that. We'll get to your opinions on those in the second segment. But this one is the major wrap-up segment, basically. And we'll talk about the transactions throughout the season as well, even starting off into the summer, and how those guys turned out and didn't turn out, and guys having a nice renaissance, and other guys dropping off, and guys getting traded, and, of course, a general manager who's looks like he knows what he's doing, and then in other cases, it's like, what was that? So it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. That's what we could say about the Minnesota Wild season. Of course, missing the playoffs for the first time in 6 or 7 years. We could call it either way. 6 consecutive postseason appearances, so I suppose we'll call it 7 to be safe. Second segment, we'll very briefly look at the postseason. It's like, who cares? It's not us, right? No, yeah, we'll look at the postseason. We'll celebrate the champion and all that. We'll celebrate the postseason a tiny bit, even though it was pretty good. Some rounds were better than others. You could say the first round was better than the second, blah, blah, blah. The third round, good moments and some not so good moments in the conference finals. And we'll talk about the cup final as well. So, we're also going to add a segment 1.5. That's going to debut for the first time ever on this show. Going to remember somebody very important to me, Neil Nate Dog Thiesing, and some other common conversation in that very brief segment 1.5. I actually created that for Timberwolves Explosion to kind of review the NBA Finals, this and that, because some good friends from that show told me, don't make such a long segment about the NBA Finals. It should be mostly about the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I'm going to try to do that as well with Brave the Wild. Second segment will be, again, like I said, brief postseason review. But then we'll get into free agency and draft conversation. Draft first, free agency, salary cap. We're going to talk about salary cap a bit in the first segment as well, just because that's how we roll here. Some of the prospects hopefully coming into the later stages of summer and go from there. We'll talk about more and more about the prospects later in the summer as well, hoping certain guys make the team and certain guys getting signed that were, kind of career minor leaguers, still relatively young, in Jerry Mayhew's case. So very nice story there. Hopefully he can make the NHL roster next year and make things very interesting, signing a 2-way contract. But that's pretty much the gist. That's what the second segment is. We'll get to the past. We'll get to the past right now, the season review, and then the present and future in segment number 2. So let's go. Well, 2018-2019, you bring in Paul Fenton. He drafts Philip Johansson. I wish it was Philip Forsberg. And yeah, he was part of Philip Forsberg as well, actually, I got to think, because it's Nashville. And he ran the draft in some of those years. He signed some free agents. You got Greg Patter. No, he's a right shot. He's a big physical guy who can't score for his life. Blah, blah, blah. You had Ryan Suter coming back from the tallest bone. Eric Fair signed. Nice fourth-line center. Ended up being better than we thought. After a pretty meh sample size the past couple of years, Eric Fair, definitely a nice, solid renaissance for him. So, let's just get stuck straight into that. Ryan Suter came back from the talus bone in his ankle, getting broken, that little socket, basically, in the middle of your ankle that basically creates the action, the movement, the lateral movement in your ankle, or rounded movement, whatever you want to call it. It's a tough task to come back from. He did come back, but his movement wouldn't be the same. His turning wasn't good. He was slow on his turns, this and that hurt him a bit. But he still played the most minutes for the Minnesota Wild once again, which is, I don't know. Ryan Suter kind of gets what he wants, like it or not. And I don't know. I mean, it's like, imagine if Bruce Boudreau's a king, like say it's England or something back in the old days. Well, Ryan Suter would be a Parliament knight, which in a lot of times those Parliament knights ended up being more powerful than the king because, you're going to try to pass this law, not while I'm here with with my mighty sword. That's basically what Ryan Suter has become for the Minnesota Wild pretty much since the day he got here. Funny how it is kind of a secret country club, like the Timberwolves would always be called the country club with the Flip Saunders, the Kevin McHales and such over the years. And now I think we've created a new one with the Minnesota Wild here because, again, I've said this on many episodes in the past. Well, Craig Leopold was the owner of the Nashville Predators. Paul Fenton, Nashville Predators. Ryan Suter, Nashville Predators. Is there an echo? Anthony Bottato, and we could go on forever. Little too much Nashville Predators. We're the Minnesota Predator Wilds? I don't know. Wild Predators? We're the Wild Predators. That sounds a little better. But it is what it is. Ryan Suter, again, didn't have the best year ever. Still wound up with 47 points, though. Still put up the numbers. Both him and Dumba play very well together, even though it's a forced marriage in a sense because you got to put the two best defensemen together. It works out, and Matt Dumba plays way better than when he's with Ryan Suter than Jonas Brodin. He just does. So it kind of is what it is. But, well, Suter and Spurgeon got together later in the year because of Dumba's injury. That was a huge part of this story as well. What a sad state of affairs that ended up being. We'll get to that in a minute, of course. A very disappointing situation there. Zach Parise, the Renaissance indeed came. He was excellent for the longest time. The old Parise, it's like he looked like he was even better than he was before he'd signed with the Minnesota Wild. He looked like the New Jersey Devils Parise when he was a borderline superstar. Wound up with 61 points, did wind up leading the team in scoring. Eric Stahl finished second, play all 81 games. Parise would miss a couple because that's just how it goes. Parise gets banged up, he gets bruised, even has cracked bones all the time because that's how it is with Zach Parise. Wound up with 61 points, a -1 on the year, but it was not a good year for the Wild. I mean, Jonas Brodin was a -15. Zucker -9, and Zucker, of course, big drop-off this year as well. That's a disappointment you could add to the mix among many. Parise had 28 goals, which also led the team. So there was no 42 goals, there was no 32 goals, there was no 30 goals. It was 28. Zach Parise ended up leading the team in scoring. He dropped off a bit during the later stages of the season. You got to see some young guys emerge like Donato, this and that, and then you saw Steeler start off the year very nicely, just like he picked up where he left off. And then the acquisition of Anthony Bottato on the 25th of January certainly did not help his cause. It seemed to kind of play with Steelers' mind the rest of the season. And I don't know why Mr. Fenton picked up Anthony Bottato. He provided nothing. Occasionally his defense was adequate. But, 18 games, he didn't score a single point. And I know he's not meant to be a scorer. He's not meant to add points, but, accidentally, slip and fall into an assist once in a while would be nice. 0 in 18 games. And then, of course, his defense was, it was either mediocre or it was bleeping awful. So, I don't know what else to say about that one, other than it was bleeping awful for the most part. And, what's the trend with the Minnesota Wild? Left-leaning just a little bit. And we're not talking about politics. We're talking about right shot, left shot here. Everybody's a left shot on the Minnesota Wild. Everybody. Shoot. The only guys that were right shots were like Coyle, Fair, who, sometimes you want Coyle to play center and sometimes you need you out of necessity. Fair is a center. Everyone else is left. And JT Brown, woohoo. Talk about a Band-Aid roster filler on the fourth line there, being a right shot. The guy can barely function in the NHL. He's just not good enough. He's a great AHL player, but AHL and NHL, there's a ceiling there that needs to be crossed, and I don't think JT Brown ever crossed that ceiling. Maybe occasionally, once in a while with the Tampa Bay Lightning. He didn't do it here. Of course, Coyle was dealt away. Would have liked the whole Granlund trade instead of Granlund being Zucker for Fiala. That would have balanced the roster, or at least left it the way it is, rather than adding even another left winger on Minnesota who is not a center. What a bleeping mess. And then Cunningham again, a right shot who on occasion with necessity had to play center on occasion. So it's like everybody's shoots left and some of them have to play on the right side. Like Zucker sometimes had to play on the right side. Niederreiter occasionally had to play on the right side. In fact, actually, that's pretty much all he did play for the last couple of years here with Minnesota. It started with Chuck Fletcher and continued with Fenton. He addressed right shot here and there, and then next thing you know, it's just left shots again. And I know you love Fiala, but I don't know. Did he do all that great? 7 points in 19 games? We'll get back to that more. I'm kind of jumping ahead of where I'd like to be, this and that. Greg Pattern, though, he was a big right shot defenseman. He never lived up to his salary of over $2.2 million, 2.25. basically $2,250,000. Yeah, but provided zero offense. He wound up with 6 points on the year. Was mediocre at best defensively most of the time, including some very low IQ mistakes. The Wild, as of right now, are trying to package him in a trade. They even tried to during the regular season. That would be Fenton, of course. I don't want Greg Pattern back. I don't want Greg Pattern back on Minnesota. You're better off. You're better off going with Batato. You're better off going with Belpedio or Mr. Fennel. Mr. Mennel. I mean Brennan Mennel. You're better off going with Brennan Mennel or Belpedio. And you think, okay, why do you want two tiny right-shot defensemen when you're talking about Jared Spurgeon? Well, Spurgeon's the best defenseman on the team, first and foremost. Second, well, who's your left shot defenseman if you bring up a smaller guy like Belpedio, who isn't that small, he's just smaller, or Mennel, and who could be another Spurgeon? The other guy is Nick Steeler. He's kind of big, right? He's a kind of a big guy, and he plays a mostly defense game. Like he'll trip into a couple points here and there. So, is that really the dumbest move ever? Is it that dumb, or is it? I mean, I understand you don't want your whole right side being small, but whatever. I mean, if it's the better player, it's the better player, and it's balanced. It's not like you have two midgets playing. pardon the word there. Nothing against short people whatsoever. But it's not like you have two small guys on the ice at the same time. You still have Nick Steeler, who's a very big guy. And God forbid something happens to one of the left shot defensemen. Who do you think's the first call up? That would be Carson Soucy. He was, 6'5"? He's a beast. He's a monster. And he got better in the second half of the AHL season as well. So I got to think he is easily the fourth left shot defenseman. And you got to let Anthony Batato go. You got to let Geppetto Batato go. You gotta let him go, okay? Please let him go. Please let him go. No offense, or just keep him in the minor league roster. Let him dominate in the AHL. Let him be that nice guy in the locker room. I don't know. And you still got Mr. Brad Hunt as well, who you acquired during the season. Eric Fair was a decent $1 million fourth line center that was added in the summer. A lot of times he was more of a steal at some moments. He provided much needed grit, high IQ, and some bonus scoring as well. Too bad he probably won't be back. And I mean, he probably won't, just because it just kind of is what it is. I wouldn't mind having him back, but if it's an opportunity for somebody a little younger to get their feet wet in the National Hockey League and maybe end up having a good career as a bottom six defenseman, why the hell not? Why a bottom six defenseman, bottom six forward/center for the Minnesota Wild long term? So let's kind of jump into the schedule a bit, talk about things. Eric Fair ended up finishing up with 15 points on the season, by the way. Matt Dumba only 22 points, but in the 32 games, had 12 goals in 32 games, led all defensemen in the National Hockey League before the unfortunate pectoral injury against the Calgary Flames there. Extremely frustrating moment. Again, Zucker only 42 points after a 33-goal season the year before. That is just unbelievable. I mean, he only had 9 points. The number is higher in total points by only 9 compared to his goals last season. That's what a big drop-off this year was. And Zucker had some good moments during the season, but long-term, overall, it was a disappointment to say the least, and heartbreaking as far as I'm concerned. Marcus Foligno, I thought, took a step up from the year before, but still only 19 points. But he played every game, 82, 7 goals in the season. Again, positive moments here and there, but generally speaking, is he worth almost $3 million a year? I don't think so, because $3 million in the National Hockey League is still a decent amount of money. It is. I mean, in the NBA, sure. I mean, that's a steal, man. That's a steal. He's actually less than $3 million, and he's like your fourth line, left winger. That's a steal for what he is. He's good, man. Yeah, well, let's jump into the schedule a bit. Of course, disappointing start to the season, which kind of gave you a hint as to where things were headed for the Minnesota Wild. Losing to Colorado right out of the gate. Things just kind of did what they did during the course of the season. You had some good moments, some bad moments. You lose your first game ever to the Las Vegas Golden Knights, which is kind of funny when you think about it. Yeah, you finally lost your first game to the Vegas Golden Knights, the Western Conference champion, or Campbell Conference if you want to keep that. Then you have a 4-day layoff. What the hell? You actually finally beat the Chicago Blackhawks, who still stink. You lose to Carolina 5-4, which is an indicator of how much better Carolina would be. That was on the 13th of October, of course. 4th of October was the season beginning there. The season opener in Colorado, 4-1. Oof. Colorado picking up where they left off, and they ended up having a good postseason, which ended up falling short against the Sharks in Game 7. Nashville Predators, they beat the Wild 4-2 on the 15th. On the 16th, Minnesota beats Arizona, which, well, you can't take those for granted ever. Boy, beating Arizona is a funny thing. You beat Dallas and Tampa Bay, extremely impressive in a back-to-back. It's unbelievably impressive. You beat Tampa Bay. Yeah, it's a home game for Minnesota, but you beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, who were incredible the whole season. You beat Dallas on the road. Those are two of the most impressive wins of the year, 19 and 20, and you start feeling good about the Wild. You end up winning 5 in a row. 4-day layoff again. You beat the Kings 4-1, who had an awful year. You beat Colorado 3-2. Beautiful homestand for Minnesota. And then, of course, you follow up with a loss at Vancouver. Of course, on the 29th. It's just always that way. Then you beat Edmonton, finally beat them on the road, by the way, which is great. Because Edmonton's another funny team that the Wild have always had trouble with. They crushed Mike Yo's St. Louis Blues, who were awful. St. Louis Blues. We're talking about a team that ended up having a good season at the end of the day with a different coach, Mr. Berube. Mr. Berube, boy. Unfortunately for St. Louis at this moment, in St. Louis, Mike Yeo is still the coach, and it is not Mike Yeo's fault that things went downhill. It's the goaltending situation. Jake Allen was sucking. He just magically had a great run against Minnesota in the playoffs when Minnesota had such an awesome 2017 season, 16-17. And it's just always that way. And then after that, he sucks. He sucked the last time Minnesota played St. Louis in the playoffs, 2 years before. The Minnesota took advantage and beat them in 6, despite Minnesota being only the 7th seed. Yet a team on a run in a good way. They ended up getting swept by the bleeping Blackhawks. That was depressing. But St. Louis, what a turnaround indeed in 2019. Oofda, after an awful 2018. We lose to the Sharks. It was our first loss to the Sharks in a long time. Congratulations to Chris out there, Chris Storts over there in Northern California. Gotta love that guy. Great guy over there, the Teal Town podcast. Gotta love the show too. Very, very good show. Very awesome podcast out there. Gonna always give them a shout out when given the opportunity. San Jose Sharks, they had their chance. They almost made it, but it just didn't happen. They lose in the conference final this year to the Blues, the team of destiny. 4-3 loss to the Sharks. Again, first time in a while we lose to San Jose. Brent Burns, big factor there. You beat the Kings. You beat the Ducks. You beat St. Louis again. Mike Yeo. So much for Mike Yeo owning Minnesota. With no surprise, you lose to Washington. You beat Vancouver finally. You lose to Buffalo. That was a very depressing game. I was actually outside freezing my ass off that night, November the 17th. Freezing night, about 24 degrees, doing a fall cleanup, listening to it on the radio. And then got home and watched the replay a bit. Watched as much as I could, especially the frickin' who could forget Jason Pominville's unbelievable angle on his shot. I don't know how the F he was able to hit that angle, but he did. And it got past bleeping Dubnyk, or was it Stalock? I think it was Dubnyk. Just made me sick. That was so frustrating. Buffalo looked like they were a team of destiny a bit this season, and then they end up falling off the face of the earth, missed the playoffs, and they fire Phil Housley. Phil Housley, who I would have really liked to see his wife win the senator position here, but she didn't win it, and that was disappointing. Poor Phil Housley. Think how good Buffalo was doing with Phil Housley as coach at that time. Look like they're finally going to get back in the playoffs, and it just went all the way down to you-know-what. Then you lose to Chicago, with them outside freezing again, trying to get work done. You lose to the bleeping Blackhawks. That was just disgusting after getting you're beating the Buffalo Sabres 2-1, 2-0, and then they end up coming back, the most dangerous lead in hockey, blah, blah, blah. You lose to the Blackhawks, and it's like, yep, here we go again. Patrick Kane schooling us once again. Anytime he has an opportunity, he's going to score. 21st, couple of days later, November. I was freezing. I'll never forget that night, November. And I've been out there in 12 degrees with below zero wind chills doing lawn cleanups. But that night felt almost worse. It was just weird. But it was a beautiful night. I'll give it that much. On the 17th of November, you beat Ottawa. Finally got the cleanups done at that point. Go home and watch that game, chill right before Thanksgiving. You beat Ottawa, the worst team in the league, 6-4, and they end up getting the 4th pick in the draft, though. That sucks. They gave it to Colorado, but yeah. Winnipeg Jets, you beat them, who we just dominated this year. You lose to Arizona, big shocker. That was a crappy game. Lose to Columbus, which we always do. 29th of November as we continue to edge forward if humanly possible. I don't mean to go over the schedule completely, but it's like, losing to Toronto, Vancouver, blah, 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 you beat them. I'm going to kind of slide around. You lose 2 games to Calgary in December. A 7-2 demolition against the Edmonton Oilers. 7-2 demolition. We lost. That's a loss, by the way, not a win. That was the most disgusting game ever after losing 2-0 to the Calgary Flames the night before. 7-2. That was a big low light. Crushed Montreal with Mike Riley, a part of things there, as he was traded last offseason for a 5th-round pick. Not offseason, last trade deadline. One of the last moves Mr. Fletcher would ever make. Florida Panthers, you crush them 4-1. You lose to Calgary again. 4-0 loss. Mr. Jones, who had one of his better games of the year, 4-0 win over the Minnesota Wild. You lose 5-2 to Chicago on the 27th. And, of course, as always, you lose on New Year's Eve. Always. And this time the Pittsburgh Penguins, Phil Kessel, who is in trade talks. They're talking about trying to get him here, but he doesn't want to come here. He doesn't want to waive his no move to come here. He would waive it to a different team. So, thanks, Phil. But I suppose his success wouldn't be so good here. I'm not sure where I stand on that one. I don't think I'm too excited about it. Wild start off the year good with a couple of wins. 3 wins in a row, actually. And then 4 out of 5. But, of course, you mix up with the best team in the East, it turned out. The Boston Bruins, 4-0. Blah, blah, blah. Losing 5-2 to Detroit. 3-0 to Anaheim. So many low lights, but then you beat Vegas again. The Detroit game was a huge low light. Huge low light. I mean, this is when things were getting real ugly. 7-4 loss to Philadelphia. I don't know what the F that was all about. And then, of course, getting shut out by Gibson of Anaheim. That was frustrating. You finally beat Columbus. Finally, for the first time in years. Finally, 2-1. Been a mixed bag with Colorado, but this is one of the good mixed bags. And then you head off into a major bye here, a whole week off after the Colorado Avalanche. A major bye, and the All-Star break and all that crap. As if anyone cares about the All-Star break in hockey. Dallas, Chicago, another crappy back-to-back. The Wild lose how many games in a row here? Hoofda. 4 in a row at the bare minimum in February after winning 3 in a row. So you follow up with a 4-game losing streak after winning 3 in a row. Oh my God, the month of February was the month where the Wild were going to miss the playoffs, and most people knew it, despite a 4-game win streak to wrap up the month, beating St. Louis, even with Berube as coach. That was a very impressive win. Binnington was in net at this point, when St. Louis was clearly on a run here at this stage. St. Louis was back in the playoff picture. I believe they were already 3rd in the division. 2-1 victory over Binnington. Extremely impressive win by the Wild. But unfortunately, so much damage had been done. Of course, we got shut out by Binnington a mere week earlier in February. So that kind of figured. Greasy really shut out the Wild pretty bad, too, the week before. So a couple of Sundays in a row, they're very low-scoring games. 5-4 loss to Philly. This is where some of the SHIT hit the fan here. The Wild were beating Philadelphia 4-1. 4-1. 4-1. 4-1, folks. And we end up losing 5-4. You're beating New Jersey 4-0. 4-0. You're beating New Jersey 4-0. 4-0. With a goalie nobody's ever heard of. Okay, no, I'm just kidding. This actually ended up being Schneider. I got it mixed up with a different one. This was Schneider. He took over for the awful, what was his name? Kincaid. Kincaid was awful. Corey Schneider comes in and stops everything. The Wild were up 4-0. 2-0. And they lose 5-4 on the 15th of February. So many lowlights this season. I mean, this 5-game losing streak was like, you are not going to make the playoffs, Minnesota. It's over. It's over. And, of course, there was a stretch with the loss to Buffalo, Edmonton, and, of course, you got into the 5-gamer. You just mixed in that little win over New Jersey on Saturday the 9th, but at the end of the day, Minnesota ends up losing 7 out of 8 during that stretch, and I think that was kind of the end of the run there, despite a 4-game win streak to wrap up the month of February, just to tease us 5-game win streak after beating Calgary to start off the month of March. But then the losses just kind of came right back. You lose 3 in a row after you beat Tampa 3-0. It's just pretty crazy. Back and forth. We actually swept Tampa this year. You finally beat Washington and on the road, but you lose just game after game after game. The Islanders, the Colorado, Nashville. This one was Rayner instead of Greasy with New York Islanders. Another Sunday afternoon loss to the Islanders. You beat Vegas again, 4-0 demolition against Arizona. That was painful to watch, just straight up painful to watch. And then you wrap up the year with a couple of shutouts despite a 5-1 demolition over Winnipeg, which was pretty fun, but meaningless despite the fact it was fun to beat the crap out of Winnipeg this year. You lose 3-0 to Boston and 3-0 to Dallas to wrap up the regular season. And that was all she wrote when it came to that. An overall wild, crazy season. Pardon me for all the clearing throats and such. Major moments during the course of the year. Of course, we acquired Brad Hunt on the 21st. He provided instant energy, instant offense, though there was a stretch. After a couple of good games, he was rotting on the bench because of the bleeping Anthony Boteto move just a couple days later. You trade for Brad Hunt, a swap of 6th round. We get a 6th round pick for dealing a 5th round pick, and then Brad Hunt. So that was cool. We'll use that 6th round pick coming up here in June, end of June here. You acquire Brad Hunt from the Vegas Golden Knights. Back and forth type of season. You claim Anthony Boteto off of waivers, throw him in the lineup, and screw up Nick Steeler's head the rest of the year. And of course, it denied Brad Hunt some ice time as well. But later on, Brad Hunt would play a lot of right shot, despite the fact he's left shot. He'd play right side, pardon me, despite the fact he shoots left. Extremely frustrating. You did extend Alex Stalock. Pardon me, I'm looking at Anthony here. Anthony Boteto, 3 years during the course of the regular season. So his contract actually stretches out 1 year longer than Devin Dubnyk's. So that does tell you a little hint of something coming here at some point. Doesn't mean Dubnyk's going to get traded, but it does mean the end is coming sooner or later for Dubnyk. It's coming because, well, it's not because Alex Stalock's the starter. It's because Alex Stalock is going to be around as a backup to somebody else, possibly Robson, if he ends up earning it, Mr. Robson. Or it's like people say it over and over. It's Capo Kakinen. For the longest time I thought it was Capo Kakinen. That's what I was told. It ends up being Capo Kakinen. So it's backwards there. Capo Kakinen or Mr. Robson from the Minnesota Gophers, who ended up having a hell of a run with the Gophers, at least for a couple of years. So those are two goaltenders that will be factoring majorly in the future, at least the next 4 to 5 years for the Wild, one way or another, either the starting AHL goaltender or the starting Minnesota goaltender. I think Alex Stalock will mostly be the backup goaltender for the Wild. Maybe he'll platoon with one of the two young guys as they come in as a rookie. But I think that's about it. He would platoon possibly with one of the young guys should Devin Dubnyk be moved on or not retained after his contract runs out, depending on the plan here. Devin Dubnyk has 2 years remaining at 4.333. You could just say 3 forever, basically. Yeah, it's one of those fun mathematical equations. At least that's the cap hit for Devin Dubnyk, Mr. Devin Dubnyk, who it's a pretty generous cap. It's not too bad. Stalock signed for $785. The next 3 years, $785 in all 3 years, of course. And then the conversation goes into the Kakinens and the Matt Robsons with the Minnesota Gophers. Former Gopher, of course, hopefully leading the way. Andrew Hammond, unrestricted free agent. Wouldn't mind having him come back to the Iowa Wild. He helped that team at least get to the second round. He pretty much started all the playoff games, which is kind of annoying for some of us. But hey, he was all right. Andrew Hammond is a decent player, but he might be the odd man out the way things are shaping up here because Matt Robson, well, we'll see. Unfortunately, after next year, he's a restricted free agent, but restricted. So he's our free agent. That's the good news. Same with Mr. Capo Kakinen long term. In that situation, you do have a guy who is out there as well, who is the youngest of all of them, Derek Barebo as well, $733,000. Of course, you know how it's a two-way contract. He's in the minors and all that, minors and juniors and all that situation. So he's signed the longest, though, out of these guys. He doesn't become a restricted free agent until 2022. So interesting thought process there with Derek Barebo. So he is signed for $733 should he make the NHL roster at some point for the next 3 years. $733 per up and coming. So interesting conversation when you look at the goaltenders. Matt Robson, Capo Kakinen, Derek Barebo, and of course Devin Dubnyk and Alex Stalock. That's 5 guys there. And, well, we'll see. We'll see. Barebo is obviously the biggest wild card of them all. Will he be a backup goalie in the AHL? Is he going to end up replacing Andrew Hammond? And then, is it Robson and Kakinen next year? Probably. Robson and Kakinen in the AHL next year? most likely, because Robson's not going to juniors, and he's not going back to college. He's a professional goalie now. He's either AHL or NHL. It'll have a HL one way or another. Well, yeah, I would suppose it would have the AHL one way or another, even if it's ECHL. But I pray to God he wouldn't wind up there. That would be awful. That would be beyond awful if that took place. But lots of interesting thoughts when you look at the future with Minnesota at goaltender. I mean, this team has a chance to get better fairly quickly. I mean, you got pieces, young pieces that could make this team better. Ryan Donato obviously was a wonderful acquisition via the trade. We'll look at those here a bit now. During the season, of course, again, you got Anthony Matetto off waivers, so we were making a couple moves here and there. Nino Niederreiter had been traded on the 17th. He was the first to go, though, of course, you could actually argue that Justin Kloos was the first to go, as there were moves here and there. You end up trading Ryan Murphy away for Michael Kapala, who was a left shot, which is fine. You know, he actually did pretty good in the AHL, so you did end up trading away Ryan Murphy. That was the minor league trade. Then you get into the more important ones. Now, that one was actually after everybody on the 30th of Jan. After a lot of these significant moves, Justin Kloos was officially the first to go. He was traded for Pontus Bleepen Aberg, who I don't think will be brought back. He's eligible for arbitration via free agency right now, and don't bring him back. You know, yes, he's a right shot, right wing, and you love this and you love that about him, but he doesn't care. And that was the complaint with him coming from Anaheim. Michael Russo brought it up pretty much the day he got here, and I don't think those stories were inaccurate. Nino Niederreiter traded straight up for Victor Rask. You think, okay, well, you trade away a left winger who was miscast. He was put in the right side. He was not playing well for Minnesota. You look at his season statistics, they're not very sexy at all. Though he had some, literally leading right up to the trade, he had some good games, and that probably helped make the trade, I guess. Though I'm sure Carolina was overjoyed to get rid of old Victor Rask. I'm sure they were. 23 points, 9 of them goals in the 46 games Nino Niederreiter played for Minnesota. 2 years ago, 25 goals. He was awesome for Minnesota in his, of course, contract year. And the first year of Bruce Boudreau as coach, where just about everybody had career highs with Bruce Boudreau's first season as coach. Beautiful. But again, Nino Niederreiter traded to Carolina, where they had a nice playoff run, which ended very similarly to the 03 Wild. They beat some excellent teams, including the defending champion in this case, with Washington in the first round on the road. Game 7, overtime goal, beautiful on the road. So even more significant than Minnesota beating Colorado back then, with Niederreiter being the hero, as that'll never be forgotten. Thank you, Nino Niederreiter, for that beautiful memory. 7th game on the road. It looked like for the longest time Washington's going to win the series. And then Carolina ends up coming out and doing well. They crush the Islanders, who I thought was a team that could go to the Stanley Cup Finals. I thought they could beat Boston, but didn't happen. Didn't come close. Carolina sweeps them. And the next thing you know, Carolina gets swept by Boston. Like, what the hell? Niederreiter and Mr. Charlie Coyle had a minor scuffle, but it was kind of like one of those, okay, I guess we have to do this, and God bless and all that type of situation. But Minnesota saves $1.5 million in cap hit with Victor Rask versus Nino Niederreiter. That's where you think the positive, and he's a center, and Minnesota always needs centers. And then it's like, wait a minute, though. Yeah, Victor Rask, though. There's a little bit of background with that guy that isn't so good. And he's just not good. He's slow, and I'm not sure where his mind is when he's out there. He has some good moments, and the next thing you know, it's just a whole lot of nothing. He's like the Anthony Matetto of the forwards right now. I mean, 3 points in 23 games. 3 points in 23 games. That is this right here.
What? I mean, that's freaking awful.
And as many times as I play that soundbite, there's an important thing to note. You notice how Mr. Boudreau is saying it? I mean, that's just freaking awful. Do you know what he's trying to say there? You can probably guess, right? It doesn't take rocket science to figure out he wasn't going to say frickin'. He almost dropped out the other word. Well, it is bleeping awful. And that is bleeping awful. Minnesota did sign Matt Hendricks in the offseason, but I barely even mentioned him. He was, of course, traded away as well. Only 2 points, both assists. So Hendricks ended up not being much of an addition. So that's why I barely even got to him in the offseason. Let's continue. The Nino Niederreiter thing was a big deal because he exploded in Carolina, and that was frustrating for us in Minnesota. Very, very, very frustrating. Yul Eriksson started out the season so poorly, ended up picking up the pace big time after getting sent down, and I kept begging the Wild to send him down to the AHL, and people were like, why would you do that? That's just stupid. He's perfectly fine. Well, he's like a point-a-game player in the AHL, so it brought his confidence up. He still only wound up with 14 total points, 7 of them goals, as he slowed down a little bit in the later stages of the season. But still, he picked up the pace. He was a much better player after being sent down 2 times to the AHL and then permanently returning with Mikko Koivu injury during the course of the season. So that was obviously a big thing as well, the ACL with Mikko Koivu during the season. That's a major story that, of course, needs huge conversation. Of course, Matt Dumba going out against one of those Calgary losses earlier in the year. Heartbreaking situation as well, as you continue to put the season on a bow here. 2-1 loss. That was the 2-1 loss in December the 15th for Matt Dumba, which ended up being a torn pectoral. A lot of us thought it was, I forget exactly what we were thinking at the time, like a shoulder injury. We thought he got a torn rotator cuff or something, and also the way the puck was coming off his stick during the course of that game. It looked like something like that. It ends up being a pectoral. Weird. But sometimes it just isn't what you think it is. Koivu was fairly productive in the time he was out there this year. But again, that was the Buffalo game when the ACL happened on February the 5th, my mom's birthday. 5-4 loss at Buffalo, which ended up being his final game of the regular season, unfortunately for Koivu. So the 2 major injuries that also helped derail the season. It's not like, the Wild suck, they missed the playoffs because they suck. Injuries definitely were a factor. But the frustration continues. Even if you made the playoffs, we probably would have lost to Calgary or to, I don't know. We might have beaten Winnipeg. In fact, well, if anything continued off of the regular season, we would have beaten Winnipeg. Greenway took some steps forward this year, some steps back, some steps forward, some steps back. He went up with 24 points, 12 of them goals, of course, 12-12 for Jordan Greenway. Not the most exciting season, I'd have to say, but again, did show some positivity. And it also shows, again, when you looked at, he was one of the best rookies in Wild history. Again, the draft, how the Minnesota Wild have not drafted well pretty much at all throughout their entire 20 years, 20 years, 18 years officially, with the lockout year wiping out an entire season in 04-05. But, I mean, I'm all over the place, but that's what this is. Putting a bow on the season, looking at this player, looking at that player, this trade, that trade. That's what kind of segment this is at the end of the day. The up and down season for Yul Eriksson. Does he have a chance to be a long-term third-line center for Minnesota? Absolutely. Would you prefer he's a second-line center, being a number 1 pick, a first-round pick? Yes. He wasn't a top overall pick, but he was a first-round pick. You're hoping more from him. But maybe that's what he is, a third-line center. Cunnin, to me, looks more like a third-line player as well that can play second-line. So those 2 guys obviously are going to factor in the future for Minnesota, or they'll get traded this summer. Who knows? I mean, who knows? Mr. Fenton is not married to anybody on the roster except for Boteto and Fiala, I think. Boteto, yeah, he's married to Boteto so far. Hopefully he wakes up a little bit there. That would be kind of nice, I think. Yes, the other guys get traded as well. Pavel Jenis from the Czech Republic, much to the chagrin, I'm sure, to Pavel Burnett out there, and Mary Skybaugh from the Czech Republic. We covered MNW Prospects, most beautiful website ever out there. Love it so much. But Pavel Jenis traded for Stefan Falkovsky at the end of the day with the Los Angeles Kings organization at the end of the day. Will Bitten was acquired. He was bitten, right? No, he was acquired for Gustav Olofsson at the beginning of the season as well. So kind of throw in some more information during the course of the year, the trades. And I thought he played fairly well down there in Iowa. Mostly bottom 6. He played the center, of course, for the 3rd, 4th line, sometimes 2nd line. Had some good moments during the course of the year. Often played pretty well. Hooked up with Dmitry Sokolov, who spent a lot of his season on the 4th line, believe it or not, but still productive player with 30 points in the AHL on the 4th line. That's not bad, actually, considering. Matt Reed was up and down, 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 up and down. I felt bad for that guy. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. As we continue to bounce around, look at this, look at that. Kovanov was signed. Kovanov and DeWare were signed to entry-level deals during the course of the season. Hopefully they'll have a shot to get out of juniors and at least to the AHL this fall. That would be great. We'll see what happens at the prospect camp. Looking forward to that, man. Oof. Can't wait for that. Ryan Donato, officially, this was one of the more interesting trades of the season. In fact, you could say it was the most interesting trade because Charlie Coyle was a fixture with this team forever. There were always rumors of him going to Boston. There were rumors of him going to Montreal. Those are the two teams you always heard about with Charlie Coyle. They were always kicking the tires on him, especially Montreal. But then it's like, Boston, it's like, they're interested, they're not interested. And maybe not. And he was kind of like scared to go to Boston because of the pressure, the hometown and all that. Ended up being a perfect fit. Charlie Coyle traded away to the Boston Bruins. Yep, the Boston Bruins, that team. And fifth round pick coming to Minnesota with Ryan Donato. Some people think that Minnesota probably could have gotten more for Charlie Coyle, along with the possibility of Eric Staal and a first round pick. Eric Staal for a first round pick. And Sean Curley are one of the other fourth-line players, young fourth-line players for Boston that still might end up being a pretty good bottom six or even medium six, middle six player for the Wild in the coming years here. That would be pretty interesting. But Ryan Donato has a chance to definitely be middle six at the very least, if not a top-line left winger. And that's, again, left winger who can play some center, but he's generally a left winger. Ryan Donato, obviously, very, very, very nice story for Minnesota. Scored right away. He ended up getting way more assists than goals, but he did have a game winner, which was very exciting. 12 total assists. He factored in a lot of plays, but a lot of his assists were juicy rebounds because he's putting the puck on net. Put the puck on net, and that helped make things more exciting, helped the Wild have some more positivity in the later stages of the season. But unfortunately, again, it was all for naught because Minnesota did not make it. But Ryan Donato definitely showed some promise. He quieted in the later stages of the season. Sent down to Iowa, was absolutely amazing in his first couple of games with Iowa, and then it seemed like he wasn't interested. And it was frustrating because it's like, I'm already an NHL player now. I'm tired of the AHL. But you don't want to have that kind of attitude. Greenway, same thing, was absolutely amazing right out of the gate. And then it's like the boredom and the complacency set in, which is bullshit, quite frankly. Pardon my French. But major frustration with from the Wild organization with those two guys during the playoff run and such. They had some moments, but generally speaking, they did not live up to what they should be doing at the AHL level. Which, if they're legitimate NHL players, they should have kicked ass in the AHL playoffs, but they didn't. Cunnin was consistent all season. He was solid. Of course, he came back from the ACL injury. Slow to go, joining the Iowa Wild. And, of course, again, they wanted to get his timing back, wanted to get his scoring, because he was showing some signs last year before the ACL injury, Luke Cunnin. And he slowly but surely started to gain some of that. Obviously started the year very slow, and he did eventually get called up to Minnesota, but started scoring during the course of the year. And, of course, even got to play some center as well for Minnesota. Wound up with only 17 points in 46 games, but still, there's promise. And the number one thing with Cunnin is he's consistent. You're always going to get the effort. You're always going to get something out of Luke Cunnin. And that was the good side of it, despite some major frustrations at times where it's just he would go through stretches where he just wouldn't score. But you always got the effort from him. Eric Staal definitely slowed down dramatically from the year before. 20 goals less than the year before. 22 goals on the year, which is respectable. 52 points and all that. For his salary, that's not bad. But for like $3 million a year or whatever, $3.5 million, Minnesota ends up saving $250,000 a year with the new extension for Eric Staal. $250,000, which, that's chump change in the NHL or any sport, but even in the NHL. But big drop off, and the 2-year extension, a lot of people frustrated with that. You hoped that you'd actually trade him because, well, these guys are old. Parise, 34. Staal, 34, turning 35. Koivu, 35. Come on. So you got to get a little bit younger here at some of these positions, especially the center. Rask can barely play. He's like 25, but he can barely play. Yul Eriksson is unproven still to this day. Very young, but unproven. And I don't know. You don't have a top-line center. Do you even have a second-line center? I guess that's Eric Staal, but he's awfully slow. And you can't put him in like the defensive main guy out there either, because that's what killed him during the course of the season. That Koivu injury killed Staal. Because Staal had to take on the main overall, two-way center, and it just didn't work. He's not really a two-way player. He's capable of being it, but the full-on defensive stalwart center, that's not him. And it was a mess. It was an absolute mess. We'll continue with the transactions a bit as well here. Donato, again, that was a big trade, big thing. Matt Hendricks traded back to Winnipeg, which is where he came from. Of course, he's a Minnesota native, but I mean, he played at Winnipeg last year. 7th round pick in 2020, which is pretty funny. So it's next year's 7th round pick for him. And right on the same day, the 25th of Feb, Minnesota signs a 2-year extension to Eric Stahl, much to a lot of people's frustration. And the same day again, Minnesota trades Mr. Mikhail Granlund. Mikhail Granlund, this was a big deal because I loved Granlund. He's inconsistent, he's frustrating, but when he's good, he's so good. And he scored a beautiful goal just a day before, or just a couple days before, against the New York Rangers. Not the Islanders, but the Rangers. Helped the Wild win the game. Traded for Kevin Fiala to Nashville. So there's the first official trade with the Nashville Predators of all teams. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. And Fenton gushes about Fiala like he's Mario Lemieux or Yari Curry or God knows. You see the smoothness and the skill from the guy, but the results are missing and the consistency is missing. His IQ is low so far. I mean, is he raw or what? But it's his 3rd year in the NHL already. It was his 3rd year. And the production was not there. You had the injury of the broken bone a year before, so you're not going to expect him to be spectacular. But still, I mean, I don't know. He wasn't that good. Okay, 3 goals in the 19 games, 7 total points. Again, you can see skill. You can see the smoothness of this guy's game. But is he living up to it? But is there any result? Hardly at all. I mean, his last 10 games, he had 2 points. 3 points. Okay, 3 points. Woo. One of them was a goal, and it was his last goal of the season against the Vegas Golden Knights. And the last 4 games, absolutely nothing. He was a -3 against Arizona, of all teams, which, again, actually played very well this year, to be fair. But Kevin Fiala. Well, I mean... There's a method to the madness, of course. Mikhail Granlund, is he going to demand $7 or $8 million a year? Maybe. And are the Wild in position to do that? No. So Kevin Fiala, of course, still in the the entry-level contract, so it's not a huge problem at the moment. But you are going to have to sign him very soon, unfortunately. So that's the frustrating part when you sit down and analyze Kevin Fiala, because when you sit down and look on the cap-friendly chart here, what does it say? RFA, you have to take care of him now, and I gotta think the one good thing of having a crappy season, hopefully you don't have to guarantee him too much. It might be like Marcus Foligno money, maybe Charlie Coyle money. Don't go anything beyond that. If you give him $5 million, you're an idiot because he hasn't done it. Make him prove it. A 3-year bridge contract like you did with Mikhail Granlund. Treat him like Mikhail Granlund, and I think it's only fair. He's only 22, so I don't think he's in any position to demand $5 or $6 million a year at this stage. So far that trade has been a wash for both clubs. Mikhail Granlund was a whole lot of nothing in Nashville, and they don't seem impressed. They don't seem like they want to keep him. So maybe Nashville one day will be kicking themselves for that trade, because they might let Granlund go in free agency, where he'll probably do way better on a team like, God knows, like the Boston Bruins or the frickin' Rangers or the frickin' Islanders. Who knows? Who knows where he's going to go to? Pittsburgh Penguins. Maybe he'll go replace Phil Kessel. Who knows? Maybe. Maybe. Mikhail Granlund, another left shotter, played a lot of right wing during the course of his time in Minnesota, particularly in the Bruce Boudreau era, where he was moved off of the center position, which is his original position. Going to be very interesting to see how his career projects. Would be cool if we could get him back for $5 million, but I don't think so. I don't think he's going to do that, because he is a very productive player when he's on his game. I just absolutely love Granlund. So that one kind of hit home a little bit. I was kind of sad to see him go. But that was the major trade out of all of them. Obviously, Donato was the most exciting. Fiala potentially could be the star of the team, but because he has got some smooth moves out there. But again, no result. No result. So extreme frustration at the end of the day, Kevin Fiala. And he remains to be he's a left shot. So everybody's a left shot. You almost wish, there was talk about Jason Zucker for Kevin Fiala. That would have been better. That would have been a perfect trade, left for left. So, okay, whatever. At least it's offset, left for left. But instead you trade a guy who'd been playing right, who was already a left, and who could play center, and Granlund, who actually was playing center at the time because of the loss of Koivu, for another left shot. So it's like you just add to the mix when you already have Zucker. Where I got to think, long term, you want Fiala to take over Zucker's role. Talk continues that Zucker will be traded. Will it be for Fedoruk? Will it be for or Frolik, not Fedoruk, Todd Fedoruk. Frolik out of Calgary and maybe a draft pick. So maybe that trade will still happen because the deal was done. The paperwork got messed up, just like other situations in the past, even in the draft. The old fax machine mess up, which does happen sometimes in the NHL. The paperwork just didn't get done in time. But so Zucker may wind up with the Calgary Flames after all, and the Fireside Chat sounds excited about getting him at the end of the day. Brennan Deheim from the Providence Friars. This is not the AHL, it's college. 2-year entry-level contract for Mr. Deheim, and he was on Iowa, but he didn't really play. And Gerald Mayhew, just recently, Gerald Mayhew of Iowa, signed to a free agent 2-year contract where he has a legitimate chance to make the NHL roster next year. Michael Russo continues to say, even on the fourth line, the guy could score 10 to 12 goals next year, which I say, yes. And Brennan Deheim also is a right winger, but he shoots left. So that's where the frustration comes in. But I guess he's a right winger who shoots left. That's great. Gerald Mayhew, though, is a legitimate right-shot right winger, and he would fit right in. Gerald Mayhew, greater than JT Brown. Yes. I would rather have Gerald Mayhew, I think, especially with the way everybody talks about him, and his production in Iowa was incredible. Best goal-scoring season in the history of that team, and he legitimately could be an NHL right winger who could get double-digit goals in the bottom six. A lot of people say he could even be a third-line right winger. And if he makes it, so be it. God bless him, and very cool acquisition for Minnesota at the end of the day. Going to be fun to see how his career develops for the 25-year-old Gerald Mayhew, who has done a hell of a job so far. He is from Wyandotte, Michigan. So, okay, he is an American, born on New Year's Eve in 1992. Good old 92. And I was already a teenager. A very young teenager, but a teenager nonetheless. God bless Jared Mayhew. It's going to be fun to see how he turns out with Minnesota, and a lot of people do believe that he will end up having a successful run for Minnesota. That wraps up the transactions at the moment. There's a cap conversation, this and that. I mean, Wild do have some space. They'll go after some players. We'll talk about that more in segment number 2. We were kind of talking about the current Wild and all that and the transactions that have already taken place. We'll talk about the future in segment number 2. We'll also talk about the past when it comes to the NHL playoffs in segment number 2. Let's pass out the awards, though, because imagine if I actually forgot to do that. Wouldn't that be the dumbest thing ever? It'd be ridiculous, wouldn't it? The most valuable player for the 2018-19 Minnesota Wild, I'm going to go with Jared Spurgeon. He was consistent all year. He played every game. He had a career high of 43 points. He was better than Ryan Suter. Yes, he was better than Ryan Suter. Dumba very well could have been the MVP, but he got hurt. He got bleeping hurt in a fight that shouldn't have happened. A fight he wanted no part of, really, but he just kind of had to do it because of the code of conduct. It was a code, man, the code. A code. Yeah, well, whatever. It was a crappy, frustrating, disappointing situation there. He could have been the MVP, but I think Spurgeon is an overall better player in a lot of ways. He's the best player on the Minnesota Wild, and he deserves the most valuable player for the 2018-19 Minnesota Wild. He got it 2 years ago. I just about gave it to him last year. I ended up giving it to Stahl at the last second because he was just so good last year, was Eric Stahl. The two goaltenders, of course, very respectable year. Dubnyk only had 2 shutouts, but 2.54 goals against average, still solid. Stalock had some good moments and some crappy moments, and the bad games are what really made his numbers worse than he probably deserved. And, of course, the lack of time between the pipes. I mean, only 21 games, and 16 of them were starts, so very disappointing for Alex Stalock. I think he deserved a little more time out there to give Dubnyk a little more rest, physically and mentally, at the end of the day. Continue here. The biggest disappointment was not trading Stahl to Boston for a first-rounder and Sean Corrali or one of the other fourth-line young players there, and the Rask trade / production from Mr. Victor Rask. A lot of people thought he was bad anyway, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, the guy had 48 points not that long ago, Victor Rask. He's not an awful player, but he was awful here, and he was awful with Carolina the last year and a half. So, horrible disappointment, both of those. I mean, you should have traded Stahl away. Get a little younger. Get the first-round pick. Hello. You know what a first-round pick is? And then, of course, well, you can sign somebody in free agency. I mean, it's not like Eric Stahl is a 29-year-old Gretzky here. I mean, for crying out loud. It's the dumbest thing ever. I love Eric Stahl, I mean, good for the community, good for the team, good for the locker room, but he's getting older and he's getting slower, and you could have gotten a first rounder and still replaced him. Maybe you could have even signed him in the offseason anyway and still got the first rounder. Why not? Why not? And if you don't sign him, sign somebody younger. Sign somebody younger. Stupid. Oh, stupid. And Victor Rask. And, of course, look at me telling Paul Fenton what to do. That guy could probably skate circles around me as a general manager. But I'm just saying, some of these moves make you sick. They make you frustrated. Armchair general manager. Yes. Armchair general manager. Yeah. The biggest surprise was Donato's scoring prowess, or at least the ability he brought to Minnesota. Only 4 goals, but again, the 16 assists, or 12, very remarkable run for him. It was actually 12 assists. It felt like 20. But getting the puck on net and kind of changing the vibe. Paul Fenton obviously is not an idiot. Obviously, he has helped the salary cap situation in a big way. So we're not stuck with the same old story over and over and over and over and over and over. It's just that you could have done it again with Stahl. And I know you don't want to trade away everybody, but Stahl is declining. What does Bill Belichick do in the NFL when guys are clearly declining? He says, God bless you, but we're moving in another direction. That's what he does. And he makes trades, early trades for draft picks, this and that. That's why the Patriots win Super Bowls, because they get rid of guys that, well, God bless him, but he's over the hill. And I think Stahl might be, very possibly. Sean Corrali's, 10 years younger than him? And maybe he could be a valuable piece. I don't know, a better fit for what Minnesota is. So I don't know what to say at the end of the day, but a couple of disappointing moves there, or non-moves at the end of the day. So that's kind of where I stand with that. It is what it is. It is what it is. So that's how things go. But again, Donato being as good as he was, a lot of people were kind of like, we don't know how good he's going to be right away, because he was in the AHL the whole damn season with the Providence Bruins, but ended up being a really nice story. That was the surprise of the year so far, was Ryan Donato, and hopefully he can pick up where he left off. With that said, we'll take a quick break, give you segment 1.5, and then off into good old segment 2, where we look at the NHL, and then off to the future for Minnesota. Welcome to segment 1.5 here on Brave the Wild, State of the Wild 2019. This is the first time I'm bringing this into this show. Now, I've brought it in a couple times for State of the Timberwolves, and I'll be doing it again this year, most likely. This one has a different meaning, though, than the Timberwolves Explosion one. I don't mention him as much as I used to. Neil Nate Dogg Thiesing, obviously, he passed away February the 7th, 2018, and of course, no disrespect ever meant to him. He'll always be a part of the show forever. And I know, I'm partially just, it's sad. It's sad to bring him up because I miss him so much and how much he meant to the show. Even though he wasn't like regularly on the show. Sometimes he was, sometimes he wasn't. There's all availability, this and that, a feel, all that, and who's available, who isn't, this and that. But I got this feeling, and I have to say this here and now. There's so many things that are so special that he's a part of this show because, you can access his voice anytime you download the podcast. He's always there. When you download the previous shows like State of the Wild 2011, for one, is a major example. I think his best work, like our best work together, was Worst Team in the NHL back in, I believe it was March or late February 2012. That one I've listened to maybe a million times just to hear him again and how much fun we had. But it's an incredible honor to be able to say that people would actually say that I provided something very special in terms of you can access Neil anytime. You can hear him, you can hear his personality, his laugh, and his love for the game of hockey, and just what a great friend he truly is. But one thing, it's like you sit down and put into perspective what an incredible, insane honor it is. And it's like, it just dawned on me what an insane honor it is, not only to be able to say he's always going to be on this show because of that. You can download him anytime. You could be in China on vacation as long as there's some kind of internet connection to your device, you can always download the show and hear Neil's voice again. It is just an unbelievable thing. But what's crazy is the thought that I'm attached to it forever, in terms of like I'm the only person on the planet talking with him on those shows. And it's just, I almost started crying when I heard that. I mean, when that thought came into my head, it was the most unbelievable feeling. And I just had to share that with you right here and now. It just means so much. Those of you that knew Neil Nate Dogg Thiesing off the show, some of you that only know him from the show still. I mean, what an amazing person he truly was. And just to think that, I mean, the only person he was talking to on these shows was me. And that's where it just hits you, and you just can't believe it. Yeah, what an unbelievable honor it truly is to be able to say that. I can't thank him enough, ultimately. Having him on this show, what an incredible honor. And again, we'll just say once again, his name will always be on this show forever. That's why you still see Joey Awija and Neil Nate Dogg Thiesing. He'll always be there. But I also swear on this day, no matter what happens, Brave the Wild will constantly be around. I will try to do this show the rest of my life, if humanly possible, just for that reason, to keep him around one way or another. And I will never allow anybody to delete the feed to this show. That would just be the sickest, most depressing thing ever. So, again, I'm just going to swear that right here and right now to all of you. If I hadn't already in the past, I'm swearing it right here and now, that I'm going to do this show the rest of my life, if possible. And we'll see what happens, how things go. I pray that I will live a very, very long life to be able to provide it for a very long time to those of you that do enjoy it. And again, that Neil's voice will be available for forever. And again, to be attached to that for eternity is just an unbelievable, overwhelming feeling. It is an incredible honor. With that said, I will now end segment 1.5, the very first edition of it, on Brave the Wild. And what an honor it is to be to make this the very first segment 1.5 of Brave the Wild. We are back here on Brave the Wild. We're going to get stuck into the NHL postseason first, then we'll jump into the draft a bit. Of course, a lot of that's kind of a crapshoot. Even Assistant General Manager Scott Kerber said the same thing, if you can believe it. It's just, it's kind of a crapshoot. But, you see skill, you see this, you see that, and, well, one guy's better than the other. And one guy translates to the NHL better, all that. We'll jump into free agency. The Wild will probably have to make a trade or two first if they can even make a move to figure out where they're going to actually put people because, well, it is what it is. It's not just pieces to the puzzle. If you have too many pieces, it's no puzzle. There's nowhere to put the pieces. So that's how that goes. Again, NHL postseason again. Let's wrap things up. Congratulations to the first-time champion, 52-year tenured St. Louis Blues. 52 years. They are basically expansion brothers for the Minnesota North Stars, along with the Pittsburgh Penguins and Philadelphia Flyers years ago, Los Angeles Kings, and the California Golden Seals. That was the second six. Yeah, the original six and the second six. Minnesota North Stars and St. Louis Blues were a part of that. Minnesota and St. Louis, lots of very good rivals with each other for years. Of course, the North Stars and the Wild. Multiple playoff series already for Minnesota Wild versus the St. Louis Blues. Of course, multiple playoff series Minnesota North Stars versus St. Louis Blues. The most memorable for a lot of us, probably the fairly good thrashing we put on them in the second round of the playoffs in 1991. Of course, with our new advisor, Mike Modano. That's right. He will be an executive advisor, Mike Modano. That's also part of the conversation. We can kind of go all over the place here. That's where this segment's going to be. That's why segment number 2 is a lot of fun. Like the first segment's the wrap-up, passing out the awards. The second segment's kind of like all over the place. Mike Modano, executive advisor, all that, and the miracle run of 91. Oh, this postseason reminded me of 1991 quite a bit, and the ups and downs for the St. Louis Blues. They look like they're done, and then they're not done, and they overcame this team. They overcame the Dallas Stars, and it was pretty amazing, and what an awful start to the season it was, and you had very positive additions in the offseason to the St. Louis Blues, and you figure this team's going to be really good. This is going to be a really good team. It's just, things didn't start out well. And you have a goalie in Jake Allen who, put the clamps on the Minnesota Wild in the first round a few years back, which we all remember very frustratingly with head coach Mike Yeo in charge. The Wild couldn't score no matter how many shots we put on net, no matter how great Dubnyk was. We ended up losing the series in 5 bleeping games. It was pretty ridiculous. Jake Allen was unbeatable. It was the strangest thing we ever saw. It was like Jean-Sebastien Giguère. And, of course, just like Jean-Sebastien Giguère, the next round, the goaltender of the Ken Dryden clone, basically, or whatever you want to call him, Martin Brodeur, whoever, wasn't even close to the same in the next round, and they were out. So, obviously, in the Anaheim Ducks, or Mighty Ducks, whatever you want to call them's case, they ended up losing the Stanley Cup finals at the time, but final now to the New Jersey Devils, were their third and final cup. And then the next year, the St. Louis Blues also again lost in round number 2 in the 2017 postseason. It just kind of was what it was. And then in this case, there's a guy named Jordan Binnington that gets called up. He was basically the 4th goaltender. They didn't know where to go, what to do. We got to do something. Mike Yeo was also fired. The St. Louis Blues have the worst record in the NHL. It's like, wow, they're going to get the number 1 pick this year to go with Tarasenko, and maybe maybe some goalie will pick things up and make things a little better. Also, some certain goalie might help, but little did we know they already had that goalie, and he was there absolutely, and they weren't going to have to draft any goalie, and they're not going to be taking the number 1 pick in the draft or anything. They won't be getting Jack Hughes or Kapu or anybody like that. So things just start to go better. And Mr. Berube, what an amazing coach he is. And at the same time, Mr. Accountability, Vladimir Tarasenko, I don't care how great you are. I don't care how established you are. If you're not playing up to your potential, if you're not giving it 100%, you're going to be in the press box. And, sometimes it should be that way. Who cares? Who gives a damn? Isn't that what the Wild needs sometimes? And Boudreau, not afraid to call out players, but it seems like he doesn't ever want to bench players. Why not put somebody up there sometimes that's not playing up to what you believe they could play? Heck, Ryan Suter at times, banged up, not the healthiest guy ever. Press box, why should he dictate his minutes? Why should Ryan Suter be able to dictate his minutes? And I believe Greg Berube would be different if he was the coach of the Wild. That's just my belief, and I love Bruce Boudreau, but I like what Berube did with the St. Louis Blues, accountability, and, it worked, and things just kept getting better and better and better. This Jordan Binnington kid is outstanding. Next thing you know, they're like 3rd in the division. They're ahead of the Wild, and then they're way ahead of the Wild, and the Wild keep dropping off, and the Blues keep moving up, and blah, 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 blah. Winnipeg looks ever beatable. Nashville looks ever beatable. And I had people on, one of my favorite pages out there. In fact, it is 2 of my favorite pages, MNW Prospects, Minnesota Wild Prospects, obviously a Facebook page. And, of course, Minnesota Wild Hardcore. Who could forget what an awesome page that is? Jim Maddell, Sarah Maddell, Chad Walski, of course, Chance Kostick and David Kostick. Yes, sir, Chance Kostick, brother-in-law of mine. It's actually my brother's brother-in-law, but he's still my brother-in-law, technically. So that's the cool part. David Kostick, the father there. Great guy, great old North Star fans that became Wild fans over the years. But no, I got a little teeny bit of flack by somebody. I can't remember who it was. It wasn't any of the people I just mentioned. I had St. Louis going to the Western Conference Finals, or what I like to call the Campbell Conference Finals, because it's, it is the Clarence Campbell Trophy. I had St. Louis making it that far. I had them getting past, and they're like, I don't have them getting past the first round. And I'm like, I responded with, I feel that way about Nashville. And I was right about Nashville, and St. Louis did get to the conference final. They had to go 7 games versus the Dallas Stars, but they did it, and they survived. And it was kind of cool seeing St. Louis and Dallas in the playoffs. It's kind of like the old days again. Everything goes back to 91 for me. It just always does. And a lot of us Wild fans, of course, we talk about 03, and then you get 91. And, man, you survived the Winnipeg Jets. Winnipeg Jets were nothing like the 91 Blackhawks. That Blackhawks team was the top team in the league. That'd be like Columbus crushing Tampa in the first round, which a lot of us don't understand what the F happened there. I don't know what happened. I don't. Other than Columbus is a really good team, and there's no doubt. As good as Tampa was, Columbus is a damn good team, and there's a reason why they had a damn good record years ago. But crazy postseason. Of course, Boston had to go 7 versus Toronto, but they slashed the crap out of Toronto. And I don't mean like with penalties. I mean, they just chopped them up in the 7th game. It was really sad. I like Toronto, and luckily Toronto, the other sport in the winter, did a little better in the playoffs. They kind of were holding the Larry O'Brien trophy just the other night here. Wow, congratulations to the city of Toronto there. And I guess Ontario and Canada and all that good stuff, because that's their only team in the NBA. Carolina, I was right about that one. They did beat Washington. Ooh, and I was right about New York Islanders over Pittsburgh, a sweep. Carolina then swept the Islanders. They got to the East Finals. I think I had them doing that. Or no, it was the Islanders. I had them versus Tampa. That didn't work out. Boston goes all the way. They sweep Carolina. What a great team Carolina was. And then they ran into a brick wall called Boston, which I thought might win the cup. But, well, I was rooting for St. Louis. Yes, they're a division rival. But there's just something about this team. I mean, I got behind them in this postseason. I just kept liking them more and more and more. And the way they kept surviving. And I remember how they were down 3-2 to the Dallas Stars. Like, wow, Dallas might go to the Cup this year, because for some reason, as good as the Sharks were and as impressive as they were against Vegas, coming all the way back from a 3-1 deficit, I just didn't see them beating St. Louis or Dallas. Even though they had the higher seed, they have all these good players, and I apologize to Chris Storrs, Chris Porter, Drew Bunting, if any of you are listening, the San Jose Sharks fan base there. You guys are great, awesome people. But I just didn't see them beating the St. Louis Blues or the Dallas Stars for some reason. I just thought the Blues and the Stars were just more ready to go. Impressive comeback against Vegas. I was pissed because I love the Knights, Golden Knights. I know a lot of you don't. It's only their second season. Why the hell are they going to the Cup Finals and then maybe go back 2 years in a row in their first 2 years in the NHL? That's BS. And you get Colorado walloping the Calgary Flames 4-1 after the Flames' impressive Game 1 win. Looked awesome. Here come the Calgary Flames. We're going back to the finals again. No. And they would not have beaten the St. Louis Blues. And they just wouldn't. They just wouldn't have, because nobody beat the St. Louis Blues this year. Tampa Bay would not have beaten the Blues this year. Even though Boston put up an amazing fight, and while Boston was the better team pretty much the whole series until Game 5, that's when you knew something was, like the worm was turning here, and St. Louis really could win the Stanley Cup this year for the first time ever. I mean, just getting to the Cup Finals, it took them 49 years to get back. I mean, the amazing success of that franchise right out of the gate was something to behold. I mean, they went to the Cup Finals twice. They lost both times. And, of course, back 49 years ago, they lost to the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup Finals. And, well, 49 years later, they barely get past the Boston Bruins in terms of they had to go to the 7th game. It looked like the Bruins had this. I mean, because it just kept looking like the Bruins had it. And then it kept looking like the Stars had it. And it looked like the San Jose Sharks were going to beat the Blues, as the Blues couldn't get the call they wanted. The hand pass that ended up being okay and led to the goal, and it couldn't be reviewed. And San Jose went up 2-1. Blues players were slashing their stick against the boards. They just couldn't believe it. And the Blues won the rest of the games. Just 3 wins in a row. Boom, boom, boom. Campbell Conference champions, back to the finals for the first time in since 1970. And 1970. I mean, 1970. Do you realize how long ago that is? It's unbelievable. Bobby Orr hoisted the cup back in those early 70s, and what an amazing player he was, by the way. Whew! Bruins winning a couple cups in a row, and then they had to wait until 2011. Of course, they ended up losing the Cup Finals in 2013, much to my extreme chagrin, because you know who they played in that series, right? Most of you that are hockey fans have been around even a little while. They played the bleeping Blackhawks, and the Blackhawks bleeping won, and I was pissed, and I hated it, and I felt bad for Tuukka Rask in that series. And frankly, I feel bad for Tuukka Rask in this series, because I think he's an amazing goalie. He's wonderful, but Binnington, he had a couple of crap games in the playoffs, but the way he always responded after that crap game is what is so impressive. He's a bleeping rookie. I mean, he didn't even play a full season in his bleeping rookie year, and he took his team to a Stanley Cup championship, a team that's never won, a team that's been around, again, for 52 years. 52 years, and he hoisted it. Unbelievable what the St. Louis Blues were able to accomplish in this postseason. I mean, I cannot believe it. How the series went. You see Boston win pretty soundly, pretty easily in Game 1, and it was just like, well, okay. I mean, I guess Boston's going to win. I mean, everybody can see it happening. Blues respond. Boston wins again. Blues respond. It was kind of a little back and forth. But then when the Blues won Game 5 in Boston, that's when it's like they are going to win it. And they're going to close it out in St. Louis in Game 6. And then for the second time, like obviously Game 3 was the first of the Blues hosting a Stanley Cup final game in 50 years, whatever. And everybody's all excited about it. And you have Brett Hull smashed up his ass. I mean, smashed like you wouldn't believe. And it's like, the game hasn't even started and he's smashed. That's dumb. Like, just enjoy the game. Why? Why do you have to be smashed before even the game starts? How can you even coordinate what the hell's going on during the game? How can you even know what's even happening? Just, he scored. That's basically what that was. And again, Brett Hull being smashed, I mean, it was like karma for the Blues, I guess, because they looked awful in games 3 and 6, when it looked like game number 6 was going to be the night of nights for St. Louis. They're going to win the Stanley Cup at home, and everybody's going to be so excited, and it's going to be wonderful, and the Bruins came out and swatted them like flies in that game, and Binnington was horrendous. He got absolutely demolished, and you figured, oh boy, this could be it. And it's kind of like what happened to the Bruins back in 2011, when Luongo looked all good, and then, Boston gave up all those goals. Luongo, of course, of the Vancouver Canucks at the time. But then they went into Vancouver. I mean, you thought Boston was going to clinch the cup at home. They go into Vancouver, game number 7, and it was just lights out. And the Boston Bruins won the Stanley Cup. St. Louis goes into Boston, and the St. Louis Blues win the Stanley Cup. It was lights out. I mean, the Blues could hardly get a shot on goal starting out the game. And then 3 minutes in, the Blues finally score. Ryan O'Reilly, who had a 6-game point streak in this series, which ended up helping him get the Conn Smythe Trophy, his 8th goal of the postseason, opened things up. And then Pietrangelo with 8 seconds remaining. You knew Boston was in big, big trouble when you have a goal 8 seconds remaining in the first period, and you're down 2-0 at home in Game 7 of the finals. You know you're in huge trouble. Lots of opportunities back and forth, but unbelievable, historic goaltending by Jordan Binnington along the way. I mean, Boston might have scored 5 or 6 goals in this game. Their opportunities were remarkable, yet Jordan Binnington just put the clamps down on everything. And my goodness, Pietrangelo with 16 assists in the postseason. That is really something. Ryan O'Reilly with 15 assists in the postseason. That's unbelievable. Great postseason by both of those guys. What an amazing year. Pietrangelo with his 3rd goal again, by the way. So total of 19 points in the postseason. Amazing postseason for this St. Louis club. And again, I'm gushing about a division rival who's a hated division rival who we've beaten once and lost to once in the playoffs. But it's an amazing story. You got to recognize it. I mean, if you're behind the microphone talking hockey, this was amazing what St. Louis accomplished this year, and I'm gonna recognize it. It's not the bleeping Blackhawks, even though we've had a lot of history with St. Louis. I've said that about 50 times already on this show in the last few minutes here, since segment number 2. But this was really a freaking amazing job, especially by Jordan Binnington. And to think, in fantasy, I know you all care so much about my fantasy hockey team, but I got to say this. I mean, I sneak into the final. Well, I didn't sneak in. I got into the final pretty soundly, I guess. It was close. And then somebody cuts Jordan Binnington for some strange reason. I couldn't believe it. It was one of the guys who got eliminated. I think it was the guy who got eliminated on the other side. I couldn't believe it. And I just scooped him up. And, well, he was the difference. He won 3 games during that week, and I ended up winning the finals. It was my first final in like 12 years because I had been kind of inactive and kind of bored. But that was my 3rd championship in fantasy hockey, and Jordan Binnington was the quote-unquote Conn Smythe for my team. And I thought Jordan Binnington had the Conn Smythe for this because what an amazing Game 7 he had, and, of course, amazing postseason all over the place. But Ryan O'Reilly ended up clinching it because, well, he scored so many points in the postseason. I mean, we're talking 23 points, a 6-game point streak in the Cup final. I mean, he was so consistent. It was the consistency of Ryan O'Reilly versus the inconsistency of Binnington in terms of Game 6 versus Game 7. But to me, Jordan Binnington is the most valuable player of this team in a lot of ways. But no, I mean, the addition of Ryan O'Reilly in the offseason was one of the reasons why St. Louis should have been in a good position to maybe get to the conference final, something like that. Unfortunately, you still have Jake Allen as your goalie. You fold your hands and pray. Hopefully, you got something there. that was the thing. I mean, Jake Allen, can you trust him? That's what it was. St. Louis, though, they was their little push, their chance, and then when they start off so horribly, that's why you saw the firing of Mike Yeo. Regardless if it's his fault or not, something had to change. A personality in the locker room had to change. And, of course, a little bit of luck. I mean, super-duper luck with Jordan Binnington. And, well, there you go. You got a Stanley Cup champion. It's easy, right? It's real easy. It's easy. Just easy. You just fire your coach. I mean, you make a lot of nice off-season additions. You suck for a couple months. You fire your coach. You just happen to have this other guy on the bench who's probably a better fit for this roster. I think I would have to say so. I think he's an awesome coach, Berube. And it's kind of surprising he didn't get an opportunity earlier, but that's how it goes. Maybe they thought he's a little too rough. Yeah, you think he looks like the kind of guy. Yeah, you just stay away from that guy. You know, he's going to beat the hell out of you if you cross him. Be polite, be respectful to this Berube guy, and then you won't get hurt. He won't knock every one of your teeth out. And well, it's real easy. That's all you do. You just hire this tough guy who like he could kill you, and there you go. And you just call your AHL or goalie up that you were lending to. Was it Pittsburgh? You were lending him to the Checkers, Charlotte Checkers. That's who it was. So that's technically the Carolina Hurricanes. They could have probably used Binnington's help a little bit, even though their two goalies did a good job. Binnington a little better. The Charlotte Checkers, they were just loaning him because they had no room for him on the AHL or the NHL. They're loaning him at one point in the year. Loaning. I mean, isn't that insane? He's the fourth goalie you're loaning because there's no space for him right now, and he needs to get in between the pipes because they knew something. They knew he could play a little bit, but not at the NHL. You know, he's just not ready for that. Well, he was ready enough, wasn't he? And there it is. There's your Stanley Cup final, your postseason. Amazing job by the St. Louis Blues, and this is one of the best stories I've seen in a long time. This is the happiest I've been after a Stanley Cup final since 2012 because I loved what the Kings did. Even though it's like I'm not a Kings fan, obviously. Every time we play them, I would get so frustrated because back in those days, and really all the time, except this year when they're horrendous, it was fun playing them this year. I loved it. Loved the Kings this year. We just kicked the crap out of them. But for years, it was the California curse. I mean, you just look back in the archives for Brave the Wild, the California curse. You go to Los Angeles and you go to Anaheim, and it's like loss, you know, or loss tie, or loss, overtime loss. It was just devastating every bleeping time, and I hated it. But I really enjoyed the 2012 LA Kings. They were another team also, though, that was doing really good earlier in the year. Or like the expectations were higher than normal for that franchise, like the Blues were coming into this season. And they ended up finishing 8th. They sneak into the playoffs, 8th seed, and they sweep Vancouver after Vancouver looked like had an amazing season. And maybe they're going to get some. They're going to get redeemed for last year's loss to the Boston Bruins. They're going to go all the way and win the Cup. Not so fast. The Kings just swept everybody until the New Jersey Devils managed to squeak out one victory or two versus the LA Kings in the Cup final, and that was it. It was a Cinderella final with Zach Parise's final games with the New Jersey Devils, and the LA Kings win the Cup. That was a lot of fun to watch. 2014 was fun also with the Kings, but 12 was better because this is the 8th seed that went all the way. So this was the most impressive story since that, without a doubt. And congratulations, St. Louis. Wow. And Berube, love you. What an amazing coach, and just love what this team was able to accomplish. With that said, it's time to turn back to the green, red, gold, wheat, white, whatever you call our team's colors. Yeah, there's definitely a wheat color, that's for damn sure. You see it everywhere. And back with the Minnesota Wild here, as we start looking at the mock draft. Well, Curver said it best, and again, God bless him in his recovery period. Luckily, he seems pretty healthy so far. Obviously, you can't say too much. We don't know, but he seems healthy enough. If he's out golfing and he's still in the meetings and he's still involved. That's, of course, assistant general manager of the Minnesota Wild, working behind Paul Fenton. Paul Fenton's right-hand man. He's recovering from cancer, so God bless Mr. Curvers there. God bless him in a big way. Big way. But as he said, it is kind of a crapshoot. He worked for the Tampa Bay Lightning before. They were looking at Teravainen, I believe. Yeah, Teravainen. Yeah, he's the one that went on to the Carolina Hurricanes to have a pretty good run here so far. He ends up getting picked by the Blackhawks at the time first, one pick ahead of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they go with this goaltender. Just what the heck? We got a shot in the dark here. Obviously, he's good, but how is he going to translate to the NHL? And he ends up being Vasilevsky. So, bada bing, bada boom. I mean, it is a lot of luck. There's a lot of luck involved in the NHL draft, and then you have other guys. You take this guy, you just loved what he does, and the guy behind him ends up being, frickin' Sebastian Aho. It's just, what do you do? Brock Besser. And it just keeps happening. It keeps happening, especially to us. It's always us, right? And it's really frustrating. But that's how the NHL draft is. You have Michael Russo in The Athletic talking about the Minnesota Wild winding up with Podkolzin, another Russian, who you'd have to wait 2 years, but he's 18 years old. So, la-di-da. You have to wait 2 years for him to wrap up his KHL contract, so he'd be 20 years old when he's available. I mean, how many players do you have to wait, usually a couple years anyway, to play for the Denver Pioneers, the Minnesota Gophers, the Minnesota Duluth Bulldogs? I mean, at least 2 years, right? Oftentimes, unless you're in the top 3, top 5 of the draft, you're not going to get them right away. And the guy's electric. He's spectacular, and he plays on the right side, which, well... 2 years from now, a guy named Kaprizov could play on the left side. Do you see the picture coming together here? Do you see it? Do you see it coming together here? Does it make sense? Unfortunately, on the current mock draft here, this is draftsite.com. This is at least this mock draft. They have the Anaheim Ducks taking Podkolzin, which would be a bummer. Hopefully the Gophers could wind up with him. The Wild can wind up with him. There's a couple players that have been mentioned time and time again. Alexander Newhook, that's where they have the Wild going in this draft. Center there. 5'10.5", 192 would not be a bad addition. I really like Arthur Kaliev. I like him a lot. 50 goals in the OHL for Hamilton. Love him. He's a right shot, right wing, all that. 6'2". Definitely got the scorer's mentality. They have him dropping to Colorado, which would figure if he ends up being a good player. Again, we don't know. I mean, the guy dominates at this level. He dominates at that level. Is he going to translate to the NHL? You see the amazing skill, but do they translate? Newhook, a bit more of a playmaker, but still very capable of scoring. Newhook would not be a bad addition to this team. The unfortunate part is his size isn't real big, but, well, whatever. I mean, if he can do it, he can do it. You don't necessarily need to get the biggest guy in the world. Definitely a savvy, smart player. And again, according to Draft Site and all that, he's got excellent foot speed, diagnostic, all that, very high hockey IQ, which, again, you hope does translate to the NHL, and it can. Newhook, again, much more of a playmaker than Kaliev. He's more of a 30-goal, 60-assist type of guy, potentially, at least at that lower level, and who knows if that could translate to the NHL. But it definitely can score, but more of an assist maker, where Kaliev is like 50 goals, 50 assists type of guy, so I really like Kaliev. That's in the OHL level. Again, you have to wait and see how things go there, but it would be quite fascinating. Some drafts have I keep calling them the Gophers, and it's getting ridiculous. They have the Wild taking out Victor Soderstrom, also more of a defensive-minded, stay-at-home defenseman. Again, another Swedish player, which would be nice. I mean, another Swedish defenseman. We all know how good those Swedish defensemen are. I mean, and Brodin's one of them. He's very good. He's under 6 foot, so he's definitely not a big guy. He's not taller like Mr. Brodin is. 30 points at the level he's but, I mean, will he translate to the NHL? It's hard to say. He is more of a stay-at-home type of guy. Limited action in other levels, like only 9 points in 30 games, this and that. So it's kind of hard to say how he translates with the points, but the talk is he is a bit more of a stay-at-home, solid defenseman. Not the worst thing you could get there, but I think at 12, I think you got to aim a little higher. And, I mean, you're always thinking offense, and we do have a lot of good defensemen in the room. Luckily, Paul Fenton has been talking about best player available, and to me, the best players available, I think you got to go with the guys that could be prolific scorers, potentially. And to me, the best player available would be Podkolzin, if he's available. I mean, I would love to get Vasily Podkolzin, if he somehow is available. Because, oh my God, you have to wait 2 years for him to come out of the KHL. With the 12th bleeping pick, it's not going to kill you. And, well, you just might have a nice little wave of Russians coming in that can actually really, really play. And if you have Podkolzin with Kaprizov, whoo-wee! Kirill Kaprizov and Podkolzin, Vasily Podkolzin, that'd be pretty beautiful. You also have, again, the young center with the Minnesota Wild signed to a entry-level contract. which could make things very interesting. Another Russian with a chance to be excellent, I think, long term as well. Did very well at the lower levels, and I'm looking forward to what he could potentially do. The Wild also acquire Fedor Gordiev. At the NHL, he'd be paid $791,000. At this point, he's age 20. He's a left defenseman, so his odds of making the roster at this moment not real high. So we'd have to wait and see on that one. Kolvanov is the center I was talking about. He's only 19 years old and showed a hell of a lot of promise in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. So we'll see what happens. Imagine him as the center with Kaprizov and Podgorny. That could be a really good line, and hopefully things could translate to that, and Minnesota Wild could be in for a very positive run here. You're going to get Brandon Deheim coming into the AHL next year. That'll be good. See how he translates. He's a right winger who shoots left. That's kind of interesting. Again, Kunin, you got to think he's NHL material at this point. Will Bitten. Yeah, Will Bitten. He did pretty well later in the season. Mason Shaw, very sad news. His third ACL tear. And the second on the same knee. My goodness, that's devastating when you think about that. That's, heartbreaking for Mason Shaw. He had another ACL, so the odds of him coming back next season, we'll see. Maybe late in the year, but there was Game 3 of the first round of the postseason. The Iowa Wild did get to the second round and ended up losing to the Chicago Wolves, who wound up winning the cup there in the AHL. Calder Cup. Very disappointing to see that happen to Mason Shaw yet again. Impressive first-round series against the Milwaukee Admirals, the former team, obviously, for Paul Fenton. Again, the Milwaukee Admirals, very, very... We'll be talking about them all the time, probably, with Paul Fenton as GM, as he was a big build up the AHL, and then, have you guys develop down there, and then things get more fun when they develop up to the NHL level. That's what I like about Paul Fenton. Some of his approach, some of his moves are kind of weird, and his personality is a little strange, obviously. But if you're going to build up the farm that way, putting guys in the AHL, have them develop there, and then call them up rather than just NHL, let's go. I think that's good stuff. And it's not like he has them rot in the AHL for 5 years. He might have them, he might have them improve their game, develop, and learn for maybe the maximum of a year, maybe just a few months, depending on how well you do and how ready you truly are. That's good. That's good because Yul Eriksson, how did he do when he finally got sent down into the AHL? I was begging for the Minnesota Wild to send Yul Eriksson down to the AHL. And what happened? He was a point-a-game player down there, made the Iowa Wild better, and then, by the way, you call him up and he's a completely different player. Completely different. His confidence. Just like a hitter in Major League Baseball, he's batting 111, and we're enjoying baseball quite a bit this season. He can't hit worth crap, yet you know the talent's there. You send him down to AAA. He hits .320, hits about 10 home runs in a month, and it's like, okay, I think he's figuring it out a bit now. There you go. Maybe 2 months later, he's at like 15 home runs. He's batting .340. Drove in about 35 RBIs or so. Let's do this. Let's call him back up. He's starting to show what we thought he could do. And it's the same thing with hockey. It's a different sport, but it's the same thing when you develop guys at the minor league level. And that's what I like about Paul Fenton. He's much more focused on having guys develop down there rather than just throw them to the Wolves immediately, because it doesn't always work out. Rather than have the guy buried in the lineup, frustrated, thinking he's never going to score, never going to be anything in this league. You end up trading him away for a 7th-round pick, and he struggles elsewhere, and he never accomplishes anything. Because maybe the other teams think, yeah, he's a bust. He's 25 already, and he can't do crap. That type of thing, because you screwed him up. You just left him in the NHL the whole time. And he played no AHL games, hardly, which is stupid. If guys pout when they're sent down to the AHL, they have the wrong attitude, and that tells you right away, right there, that they need to go to the AHL because your attitude's in the wrong place. You need to humble thyself. Humble thyself, young man. Please. That would be greatly appreciated. With that said, it's going to be a fascinating draft. It's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be interesting to see how the draft goes. I don't know. It's all completely random. Obviously, there's guys in this draft that are going to really go on to be something. Obviously, there's guys at the top of the draft, and there's guys later on. What's cool about this one, though, is that they go all 7 rounds, which is pretty impressive. I'll just name the names. Maybe they'll hit on 1 or 2 of them. In the second round, they have the Wild taking Jamison Rees, left winger from Sarnia of the OHL, 42nd overall. Third round, the Minnesota Wild take Ilya Miranov. There you go. That's out of Yaroslavl, KHL. There's your Russian defenseman this time. That's cool. 73rd overall. No 4th round pick, unfortunately, but you have 2 6th rounders, and you finally have a bleeping 2nd rounder for the first time since 2013. My goodness, stop trading away all our 2nd rounders, Mr. Fletcher. God bless you. Costa Manikis out of Stouffville, a 6'2" center. That'd be cool. 5th round. Well, I mean, size is good. Hopefully it translates to more than just a 4th line guy or some guy that rots in the AHL or just stays overseas forever. But no, I mean, that's the CCHL, so yeah, he would at least be over here in North America. Michael Vukojevic out of Georgetown of the Ontario Junior Hockey League. 6'3.25". All right. 6th round there. 166th overall. 6 picks later in the 6th round. 172 Grant Stilanov out of Cedar Rapids. That sounds familiar. That city sounds kind of familiar. The United States Hockey League or U.S. Hockey League. Left wing. 5'11". Ooh, another city that sounds familiar that's not too popular for Viking fans. Ethan Frisch, 7th round, 197th overall defenseman out of Green Bay, U.S. Hockey League. 5'11", defenseman. So we'll see what happens. And they even have the Minnesota Wild going 16th overall in 2020, which obviously we have no idea what's going to happen there. The Minnesota Wild take Antonio Stranges out of London of the OHL. What if that was right? That would be funny. What if it was right? That'd make me laugh if they actually freaking nailed that one. What if they're like, screw it, the Wild are going to suck. Number 1 overall, Minnesota winds up with Mario Lemieux ×2. Okay, I'm just kidding. That'd be nice if we did. A lot of people think Capo Caco is actually going to be better than Jack Hughes. So maybe the New York Rangers struck gold. And for the first time ever in this mock draft, the Chicago Blackhawks do not take Alex Turcotte, the under 18 there. They're going to Saskatoon. They're taking Kirby Dach, who's also a center, 6'4", way bigger than Alex Turcotte. Interesting. It sucks to think that the Chicago Blackhawks could be adding a major talent there with the 3rd overall pick in the draft, but well, it is what it is. It is what it is. They're the ones that got lucky, and we're the ones that didn't. And it just makes you feel all warm and fuzzy, doesn't it? I feel so warm and fuzzy that the team that actually was 1 pick behind us moved all the way to 3rd. Oh, don't you just feel happy for the Blackhawks? It's just great. It's just great. And bullshit pisses me off beyond belief. But what the hell can you do? What the hell can you do? Seriously. I mean, well, you could go to free agency. You could sign Jason Spezza. No, I don't know about that. Sergei Bobrovsky, 31-year-old goaltender. Erik Karlsson, he made $6.5 million last year. He's a UFA in Minnesota. I don't want Erik Karlsson. I didn't like what I saw with the Sharks. He wasn't that good. I mean, he had his moments, but he wasn't that good. Panarin would be the most beautiful signing ever. He's 27. He's still got a long career ahead of him. He's the 9 billionth left winger out there, but he shoots right, so that's interesting. Why not just play right, damn it? 87 points last year for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Definitely a star in the making, but he's going to be seeking $8 million and up. Same with Matt Duchene, who actually did really well with the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I made fun of him and all that stuff, but he was one of the heroes of the Columbus Blue Jackets last year. He could be seeking a huge amount of money. He made $6 million last year. Joel Pavelski, he was injured pretty bad against the Vegas Golden Knights. He had a concussion, but he ended up recovering and eventually playing against the St. Louis Blues. But unfortunately for him, the damage was being done with the Blues beating the Sharks. It was nice to see Pavelski back out there, but I don't know. He scored 38 goals this year, but I don't know how much you want to give a 35-year-old. I mean, I don't know. I mean, just like this whole Phil Kessel talk that was going on, it looked like it was a done deal. Jason Zucker for Phil Kessel. Phil Kessel didn't want to come. He would not waive his no-trade clause, and I think it's okay. He's just getting old, and he's getting older, and he wouldn't fit in as well here as he did over in Pittsburgh. I mean, Pittsburgh was the perfect fit for Phil Kessel. Joe Pavelski, I can't see him leaving the San Jose Sharks. I just can't. Just like the other Joe, his older brother, Joe Thornton, 40 years old. He's either going to play for the Sharks or he's going to retire, I got to think. He's ancient. I don't think I want either one of those guys. And God bless him. I would have loved to have him earlier in their career, but I don't see it happening. Mike Smith is available, Calgary Flames. He did a good job. It wasn't his fault the Flames lost. The Flames just in front of him. I mean, it didn't help that Johnny Hockey didn't do Johnny Jack Bleep. I mean, the trick, I guess the whole talk is just hit his hands a little bit. Just hit his hands a bit with the stick, and he's just not the same guy. He's just going to kind of, I don't know, and far be it for me to say that, I'd play through that. That's easy, because, I mean, I wouldn't want to get my hands banged up with sticks either. That would hurt like freaking hell, but, well, I mean, some players play through it and some players don't. So, I mean, that's just crazy stuff. Pominville, no thanks, 36 years old. Everybody up here is ancient history, except for Duchesne, Panarin, and, well, Carlson's 29, but do you really want Carlson? You really want Carlson? Tell me the truth. William Carlson, he's a restricted free agent. I can't see him leaving the Vegas Golden Knights. That would be kind of crazy. Like 30 this, 30 that, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30. Do you want all these 30-year-olds? Shall I even mention their names? Justin Williams, 37. What an amazing fit he was with the Carolina Hurricanes. I hope he stays there. I hope he keeps playing. I'm sure they do too. 23 goals, 53 points. Solid guy, and it's his leadership that's like worth way more than 53 points. I mean, he was so valuable. Cam Talbot, he actually was respectable for the Philadelphia Flyers after sucking with Edmonton the last couple of years. Wayne Simmons, he's not even close to the same guy. No way. I'm not going there unless it's a really cheap contract. Anders Lee's going to get a lot more than the 3.7 he got this year. And it's like he's good, but it's the same old thing. Left shot. He's good, but he doesn't blow me away. He just doesn't. He's a good player. 28 goals, 23 assists, 51 points. I'm not going to cough up $7-8 million for Anders Lee. I mean, 51 points. I mean, you already have Zucker. Whatever. Is he that much better than Zucker? Maybe he's more consistent. And odds are we're probably going to trade Zucker in the offseason. I'm not going to open the bank for Anders Lee. He's 29. That doesn't mean he's old, but it means he will be eventually. And I don't see him getting any better than what he is. I just don't. I mean, a lot of people go ape bleep about Anders Lee. I don't think so. Thomas Vanek, yeah, for maybe $1 million. I don't know. But he's the kind of guy, he's never going to succeed unless he's on the top two lines. So you're not going to give a guy $1 million and put him on the top six. So, yeah, that's okay. I don't know what you're going to do in free agency, quite honestly. I don't know, just sign some old guys to play in the bottom six. Yay. I mean, yay. Richard Panik wouldn't kill me. Out of Arizona, 28 years old, right winger, 33 points. That's a guy I would actually kind of look at for a reasonable contract. $3 million, maybe, something like that. I don't even know. Patrick Laine, yeah, those are those restricted free agents. He's not leaving the Winnipeg Jets. He's not leaving the Winnipeg Jets. That's just funny to even think about. Can't believe I'm seeing the name Anthony Niemi still, but God bless him. God bless him in a big way. 36 now. I don't know, man. I mean, it's going to be trades, like a Sam Bennett type of a trade, which, I don't know. Sam Bennett so far has been a bottom six. He's been a pretty big bust for the Calgary Flames thus far. You'd hear about it all. You'd hear all about that on the fireside chat. They're not that blown away by him, and I'm not either. I mean, you gotta make a trade, and it's gotta be lucky, I guess. I mean, obviously Matthew Tkachuk. You think he's leaving Calgary after a 77-point season? No. That's what's nice about these rookie contracts. Not even $1 million a year. Like Sebastian Aho, 83 points. Tkachuk, 77. Kyle Connor with Winnipeg. Winnipeg should be good for a while. Michael Ferland is a name that's a possibility at some point, but the name you keep hearing all the time too in trades is that Frolik, where Zucker still might end up with the Calgary Flames. The whole point of that trade is to free up more cap space. Now, again, you're going to have to do really good in the draft then. If you're gonna screw around and just trade everybody away, you're going to have to do really well in the draft because, well, then you have young players that are underpaid because that's how it starts off. It starts off with a small rookie contract. And then you attract the free agents. The 27-year-old Panarin or an Anders Lee for, well, something more reasonable than 6-7 million, because he's not 6-7 million to me. You already have Zucker at about the amount of money I would offer for Anders Lee. So to me, it's just a wash. It's a left shot for the same pay. And I think, and Zucker's a little younger, right? So, I mean, and he's faster. So he's just not as consistent, that's all. So for me, Anders Lee, that's kind of a wash. Can you believe Matt Moulson made $5 million last year? Matt Moulson, I don't think he played a game in the NHL last year. He didn't. He was in the AHL all year last year. You remember Matt Moulson? We gave up 2 second-round picks for that guy. What happened to that guy? Just gone. Just lost it, man. Simeon Varlamov. He's a 31-year-old, a free agent goaltender. He's not going to get $6 million. No chance. Unrestricted free agent. Somebody's going to sign him, and he'll have a chance to maybe platoon with somebody or win a job or be a backup, whatever. If the Wild trade Dubnyk, maybe you go for a Varlamov to compete with Alex Stalock, Matt Robson, or even Kaapo Kähkönen. That's where you'd have to go there if you go for Simeon Varlamov. Same thing with Bobrovsky, who I think would demand way more money than Varlamov. But both of them decent goalies. I mean, their save percentages are about the same. I mean, Varlamov is slightly lower, very slightly lower than Bobrovsky. Bobrovsky's had some better success recently, but Varlamov has been a decent goalie. It's just the guy that replaced him this year later on was so damn good that, yeah, Varlamov is going to be a backup or he's going to be playing somewhere else. That's how good Grubauer was for the Colorado Avalanche this year. Just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful playoffs, beautiful finish to the season. So I don't know. I mean, right now the Wild's roster is too big of a mess for you to get too excited about free agency because there's too many left shots. And you don't want to talk about need, but in free agency it is need. And, well, it's a bleeping mess right now. It really is. The signing of this, you just look around at Iowa and all that with Gerald Mayhew. I mean, the signing of Gerald Mayhew, I think you move on from JT Brown and go with Gerald Mayhew. For me, that's a no-brainer. You still got Ivan Ladnia. Again, he's a right-winger, guys like that. So hopefully he steps up at some point. He's only 19 at the moment, so he's still got a chance to be something. Guys like Sokolov and all that. I mean, you're gonna be seeing guys from Iowa move up. You're still stuck with Victor Rask, of course, for 3 more years, 19-20 all the way through 21-22. So 3 more years, $4 million. The good news is, it's 3 years. $4 million is not the worst thing you ever saw, though. It's not. And luckily, it's not like the frickin' Parisi-Suter contracts, which don't end until 2025. You can finally see the red UFA button at 25-26 with Parisi and Suter. It's finally there. Before, it wasn't even there because the thing only goes 6 years down the road. 5 more years. Fiala's already a restricted free agent, so, well, there you go there. We'll probably work on that. Pontus Aberg, adios, bye-bye. He's eligible for arbitration. I'm not going to keep him. Yul Eriksson, they got to keep Yul Eriksson after the development he had. If you don't bring back Eric Fehr, hopefully you get a suitable replacement for him because Eric Fehr was good. He's a good, solid fit at that fourth-line center. He would never complain with his role. He knows his role, and he did a hell of a job. JT Brown is still with Minnesota next year, $687. Luckily, though, I think you could put him in the AHL and have Jerry Mayhew up in replacing him at that right wing, fourth line position, which, again, could get you 16 goals or something. I mean, Russo believes that guy could be a 16-goal guy even at the fourth line. He's that kind of a player. So those kind of guys are about as invaluable as they get. Those are the kind of guys that score the big goals in the big games, and they shock the world, all of that. Jared Spurgeon, eligible for a extension. He becomes a free agent at the end of next year. And so far, they've just been kind of messing around. Paul Fenton has stated multiple times he is really intends to get things going with Jared Spurgeon, but so far, according to Russo, nothing's happening. And what the hell? So they're not even talking. So I don't know if Spurgeon's asking for $9 million a year or what the story is there, but hopefully Minnesota can get that done. If the frustration has kicked in and Spurgeon wants to end up with the Edmonton Oilers, okay, I don't know about that team, but somebody else, we'll just say, the St. Louis Blues or something, that could end up happening as well. Brad Hunt, unrestricted free agent. Boteto, I don't want him back, but I'm sure Fenton will probably try to sign him again. Sealer, luckily, he's got 2 more years, so that's good. Pattern, pray to God the Wild could trade him. 2.25. I don't want him back. I don't like him. I don't think anybody does. Low IQ. Never scores, not even by accident. I mean, Sealer accidentally winds up in the stat sheets, for at least 5 or 6 points a year. I mean, Pattern is just nothing. And his IQ sucks. And he's getting paid about 3 times more than Sealer. Seriously, I don't want Greg Pattern on the roster anymore. He sucks. I don't care, 2nd pairing, 3rd pairing, and 13th pairing. I don't really want Greg Pattern on the Wild. God bless him and that kid that loves him from Dallas. He could go back to the Dallas Stars and they could be friends again. I'd not be against that at all. You got a little bit of a buyout history here. You got some dead cap space here with 1.2 still going to Tyler Ennis for 1920. So, it is what it is. It's better than paying him $4 million and him doing well in Toronto and stuff, but never here, because that's just how it is with the Wild. You never get the right pieces around, guys. You continue to struggle. It is kind of cool to note that Cal O'Reilly's the brother of Ryan O'Reilly, the Stanley Cup champion and Conn Smythe Trophy winner, so that's kind of fun when you sit and think about that. They're related and all that. It's just Ryan O'Reilly had an injury much earlier in his career, and unfortunately that derailed his NHL career, but still a star at the AHL level. It would be nice to see him get a crack at the NHL still, but 32 years old already. What a bummer for him. Jerry May, he was 26, so he's still got a shot to have a successful NHL career, believe it or not. So free agency, draft, blah, 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 the future. It's fun to talk about. I love it. I think we all do. Matt Robson, Capo Kakinen, they become restricted free agents after next season. And Derek Barebo, also, he is signed all the way through 22-23. So we'll see what happens with him. We haven't heard a whole lot about Derek Barebo, so we'll see how he translates. Andrew Hammond is an unrestricted free agent. I'm guessing that's probably it with the acquisition of Matt Robson, Capo Kakinen being what he potentially could be, and this Derek Barebo. We'll see what happens with him at the moment. It's going to be very intriguing to see where he winds up. Guys like Brennan Mennel, this and that, Hunter Warner, restricted free agent. Michael Kapla, who I thought did pretty good, a restricted free agent. Carson Soucy, restricted free agent, and Louis Belpedio, restricted free agent. All 3 of those guys, all 3 of those defensemen are arbitration eligible, and of course Hunter Warner is not arbitration eligible. We'll see what happens with him. 23 years of age. He did pretty well in the AHL level, but Kapla, I think, is a solid guy. Soucy, well, he got drafted in the 5th round, and he improved greatly last year. And Louis Belpedio, I think he's definitely got NHL in his future. It sucks that he's 23 already, though. Jeez, time flies. We'll see what happens there. Fedor Gordeev, he is signed all the way through 21-22, if I didn't already mention that, and I'm pretty sure I did. So it's going to be fun. Bartowski will be back with Iowa next year, and shots at the NHL and blah, blah, blah. Stefan Falkovsky as well, left winger for Iowa. 1 more year remaining at about just under $7 million. So I won't say the future is bright, but I won't say it's completely bad either. That's the good part. You got to just clean things up. Hopefully that Paul Fenton is up to all that, and that's what's going to be the hope moving forward, that Paul Fenton is up to making the right changes at the right time, and of course having a hell of a draft, and well, seeing the players continue to develop in the AHL, and some of them actually get to the NHL and have really long, successful careers in the National Hockey League. With that said, we're heading near the close of the show. Not quite there yet, so for those of you hoping it'd be over already, it's not quite there, but just about. Interesting to having Mike Modano on board. I'd like to, I could talk about that forever, but I talked about him off and on with the playoffs, of course. He is the name, the Mike Modano name is on Brave the Wild, and it's been there for the last few years of the Mike Modano Award for the Best Player of the Week and Mike Modano Award Winner of the Year, and I turned it to Mike Modano / Neil Broaden and all that, and I feel better about having Mike Modano on that name now more than ever, because now he's back. He's back in Minnesota, and he's a part of the Minnesota Wild organization, and that's the coolest thing ever. I think that's amazing to think that he's back in the mix. Right now, he is the business advisor, this and that, and he's actually working on the business side, strictly business, and yeah, we kind of have an idea what's really happening, don't we? He's going to have some say with the hockey side of things. Even just a little advice here and there, a little nudge, do this, do that, and he won't be nudging. They'll be nudging him, like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And there's always this small possibility if Paul Fenton really is this nightmare when it comes to PR. If he truly becomes a PR nightmare, public relations nightmare for the Minnesota Wild, and he continues to make weird, bizarre moves that don't make a whole lot of sense, like Anthony Boteto, this and that, draft picks that are kind of strange, like Philip Johansson, if he ends up being a bust, this and that. He's not a bust yet. I agree. I don't consider him a bust. I think it's too early to say that. He's just off to a slow start. I mean, Koivu didn't score for crap when he was drafted. I remember thinking, he doesn't look too good. But it's over there, and the numbers aren't going to be good over there. They almost never are. Almost never. But if Paul Fenton ends up being a PR nightmare and just continues to make the strangest moves ever and not make a whole lot of sense, some people believe, like the Judd Zolgads of the local media and others, believe that within the next 2 years, Mike Modano will be the president of hockey operations for the Minnesota Wild. That he will be moved over to the hockey operations and he will be the boss. The boss. That could happen. He has business sense, does Mike Modano. He did it with previous teams before. He did it with Dallas. He was working with them. He lives in the Arizona area now, but he's planning on moving everybody over here. Whereas, see, you thought he might be just like this guy out on the golf course, smoking cigars, maybe not doing that, but maybe, who knows, it's up to him if he does that or not, but with the big wigs and this is a greatest organization ever. You're going to love having this beautiful suite for the Minnesota Wild next year. All of you guys that work for holiday station stores, and he doesn't mean the gas station attendants, which would have been nice years ago when I worked there. He means the executives. Big. That's what suites are for. Unfortunately for us little people. Continental Diamond. That's just a small one compared to like a holiday station stores as big as they can be. But hey, Continental Diamond, God knows whoever else. But that's what he is right now. Kind of bringing guys to suites and all that, and business relations and this and that and this and that, building relationships because he's got the personality, he's got the charisma, and of course he's one of the greatest U.S.-born players ever, and statistically he is the greatest U.S.-born player ever to this point, and obviously Patrick Kane's knocking on that door. We'll see how long he stays healthy and how long he hangs around, and if he blows past Modano, who knows what's going to happen. But Modano has the personality and all that to help at least build some relations, and the team needs it right now because things are getting frustrating for fans. And season tickets are slowing down a tiny bit, but, 85% renewal from 90 is not that big of a thing to get too alarmed. It's just the fact that it went down is where it has them going, And adding Mike Modano isn't going to hurt anything. A lot of people saying he's not going to help this team win, blah, blah, blah. He's just here for the business side. Doesn't matter. Well, you never know. He might be hockey side at some point, and don't be surprised if he is. At very least, his presence with the organization, which will be full-time in the next year or so, because I believe his kid is going to graduate from high school, which then can have them all move to Minnesota. And then things are going to get interesting in the next year or two. Because if Paul Fenton continues to flounder, hopefully Craig Leopold isn't married to him. And he hasn't been married to anybody so far, which I appreciate about Craig Leopold. And when you have a guy named Mike Modano in your organization who knows a thing or two about hockey, he's won a Stanley Cup. He's been to the Stanley Cup Finals, and he's a part of this. He's been a part of the Twin Cities in the past. Some beautiful success, that wonderful playoff run, and all that. And just a beautiful part of hockey lore, as short as it was, because they moved when he was only 23. They moved when he was only 23 years old. Oh, but still, he had established quite a bit in those 4 years, and luckily, a lot of us here in the Twin Cities forgive him for kind of not saying the friendliest things of all time. When Minnesota was first awarded a franchise again, he was basically like, well, they weren't there for us when we needed them at times, blah, 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 because he's frustrated. Fans weren't showing up to North Star games, and that's part of the reason why the greedy man from Canada took the team to Dallas and then left for Europe a year later just to get a profit and to avoid a sexual harassment case. But that's pretty dumb. That's the hope that Mike Modano truly will bring that charisma to Minnesota, and a lot of us see that this thing could get very interesting in the next couple of years to see how well Mike Modano could possibly do as not only a part of things, but again, being a presence in general is what I'm trying to say. helping guys with the face-off, the power play. You just never know. Nudge, nudge. And again, with him living in Minnesota the next year or two, it's going to get very interesting to see if he does become a bigger and bigger part of hockey operations. He's gonna hold a couple of roles here, and eventually might end up being the president of hockey. I think some people do believe that. It could be far-fetched, could be nuts, but we'll see. With that said, I'm going to look and see if there's some comments here, because I did post I did ask for your MVP and all that. It got quiet. I'm surprised nobody responded. Last year we got a couple, but I do appreciate Joe Weller. I don't know where Benny Allen went. What happened to you, Benny Allen? What happened to you? Hopefully you can still respond. But Joe Weller, though, he originally met him from Minnesota Wild Hardcore, so I always appreciate his presence. He says MVP Parisi. Biggest surprise was Dumba's offensive growth, and biggest disappointment trading Niederreiter. And that was, of course, the acquisition of, I almost call him Tuukka Rask, but Victor Rask at the end of the day. And I don't disagree with that. Parisi, MVP, sure. I went with Spurgeon. Dumba's growth, that's a good one. That's a good one, and he was really something. Looks like a star, and it just sucks, and it just figures that he had that pectoral tear. Can you believe that? Pectoral, really? That's the oddest thing ever. And then trading Niederreiter. That was, Niederreiter wasn't working out here, and it's not the disappointment of, you traded this stud. It's the disappointment of, you just never seem to have the right mix of players so they can succeed. It's just bleeping shame, and it's extremely frustrating. So that's kind of where I stand with that. Pretty much covered everything, though. You got the season wrap-up, the playoffs, the draft. As best I could, because it is a crapshoot, and we'll have to wait and see there. Free agency, state of the wild, the salary cap situation, and who we have, who we don't. And I kind of went over that on the last show, but I went over it again a bit some more and in different directions on this show. And, of course, with, other things, the way they're heading. It's tough to say who the Wild are going to be able to acquire, and I'm not blown away by anybody per se right now other than Panarin, and I don't know if he's coming here. Would be great, but I think we're going to have to rely on the draft for now. I do. I think we're going to have to rely on the draft and maybe some fortunate players that step up, that end up overachieving. It's just, in a lot of ways, it's a lot of luck. There is a lot of luck in hockey, and then there's some good drafting and building the organization the right way through the AHL, which I agree with Paul Fedden. That's where I think he could keep his job, is if he does keep things going in that direction, and maybe at least Mike Modano can be a helper, if not the overall boss of hockey one day. So we'll see what happens. With that said, I want to thank you very, 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 very much for being a part of this show. Please give a positive rating on iTunes or Stitcher if you could. Positive rating on Google Podcasts. Also going to give a major shout out again to MNW Prospects, Pavel Burnett, Marek Skyba, Justin Back. You guys are awesome to keep up with the Minnesota Wild prospects out there throughout everything. OHL, AHL, NHL, KHL, Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. It could go on forever. They keep up with the prospects on the Wild and, of course, all over the world, trying to keep up with the Minnesota Wild prospects, conversations all over the place. Beautiful page. Of course, Minnesota Wild Hardcore. Love it very, 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 very much. Mentioned that already, along with the people out there that are a part of things. Of course, the Facebook page and Twitter page for Brave the Wild. Twitter.com/Brave the Wild. Facebook.com/Brave the Wild.Minnesota, because Brave the Wild was already taken with some other thing, which is kind of weird, but it is what it is. I had a tweet from somebody with the St. Louis Blues, and it's not the actual Blues, it's a Blues fan, a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't see it because I just didn't see it. You know, Twitter can be sometimes, and you're kind of concentrating on other things as you get busy. Jeff Ponder says, "Hey guys, host of Let's Go Blues Radio here. I have a proposition for you this offseason. Can you DM me and we'll chat? Thanks." And this was on June 1st, so I apologize I didn't get back to him. And Tony Ferrari talking about the prospects. Appreciate that. I hope I didn't lose contact with him, because I hadn't been responding. Just been so locked up and so busy with things of late. And that's why the show has been slow on release. But, of course, also waiting for the Cup final to end. I always do this after the final, not before. I work on part of it before, which you might understand, I hope. But, again, hopefully those of you out there are not thinking I'm just ignoring you. I did not mean to, believe me. I got extremely caught up in a lot of things. Like getting recertified as a trainer at work, and that was kind of stressful. And, well, just keeping up with the day-to-day grind of two jobs is really tough. And waiting for the St. Louis Blues to hoist their first Stanley Cup as well. So Jeff Ponder, I better, if you happen to be listening, I'll try to get back to you. I apologize. See what's going on there. Thanks again for that. At Brave the Wild is the Twitter account. I don't know why I said Twitter. At Brave the Wild, and then Facebook.com/BraveTheWild.Minnesota. Again, please do give a positive rating on iTunes, Stitcher, or iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcast if you could. With that said, God bless you, and we'll talk to you fairly soon, I got to think. It should be in the next few weeks, as, of course, we'll have a draft review and looking at free agency coming up. I love doing that show. That's one of my favorite shows of the year, if not my overall favorite, along with this one here, State of the Wild 2019. That's pretty much a wrap. We will talk to you in a few weeks. Take care.